The alarm clock's shrill cry pierced through the thin walls of the modest two-bedroom apartment at 5:30 a.m., just as it had every weekday for the past 2 years. Jack Reynolds' calloused hand reached out from beneath the worn comforter, silencing the noise before it could wake Lily in the next room. In the gray pre-dawn light filtering through curtains that had seen better days, he could make out the familiar shapes of their modest home. The second-hand furniture arranged with care, the stack of unpaid bills on the kitchen counter, and the refrigerator covered in Lily's colorful drawings that somehow made everything feel a little brighter. Jack sat on the edge of his bed for a moment, running his hands through hair that was showing more gray each month despite his 39 years. His body ached from yesterday's double shift at Morrison Industrial Supply, and he knew today would bring more of the same backbreaking work. But as he heard Lily stirring in the next room, a soft smile crossed his weathered face. She was his reason for everything, his motivation to keep pushing forward when the weight of responsibility threatened to crush him. "Daddy," came a small voice from the doorway. Lily stood there in her favorite pajamas, pink ones with cartoon dolphins, that Rachel had bought her before everything changed. The fabric was starting to fray at the edges, but Lily refused to let him replace them. "Morning sunshine," Jack said, opening his arms wide. Lily patted across the cold linoleum floor and climbed onto his lap, her small arms wrapping around his neck. For a moment, the world felt complete again. In these quiet morning minutes before the day's struggles began, he could almost pretend that Rachel might walk through the door any moment, coffee in hand, and that brilliant smile lighting up her face. "Did you sleep okay?" he asked, smoothing down Lily's tangled brown hair that was so much like her mother's. "I dreamed about Mommy again," Lily said matter-of-factly, the way children do when discussing profound things. "She was feeding the dolphins at that aquarium we visited. She said to tell you that the dolphins need fixing." Jack felt his throat tighten. "What does that mean, sweetheart?" "I don't know," Lily shrugged, but she was smiling when she said it. Their morning routine unfolded with practiced efficiency born of necessity. Jack prepared a simple breakfast of oatmeal with cinnamon while Lily got dressed for school. Their conversation flowed easily despite the early hour. She chatted about her upcoming school project on community helpers, how her teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, had complimented her reading, and whether they could afford to get a goldfish for her birthday next month. "We'll see about the goldfish." Jack said the same response he gave to most of Lily's requests these days. It wasn't a no, but it wasn't a yes either. It was the careful answer of a parent who'd learned to navigate between hope and harsh reality. As they shared their oatmeal at the small kitchen table, the same table where Rachel had announced her pregnancy 8 years ago, where they'd celebrated Lily's first words, where they'd held each other and cried after the doctors delivered the news that would change everything, Jack watched his daughter's animated face and marveled at her resilience. She'd been only 6 when Rachel lost her battle with cancer, yet she'd adapted with a grace that humbled him daily. The worn family photo tucked in his wallet seemed to pulse with memory as he reached for his coffee. In it, Rachel cradled newborn Lily while Jack looked on with the stunned expression of a new father. Rachel's eyes sparkled with joy and mischief, her dark hair falling in waves around her shoulders. The photo was creased and fading, now handled too often by fingers that missed what could never be replaced. "Daddy, you're doing that thing again," Lily said gently, her small hand covering his larger one on the table. "What thing?" "The sad thinking thing. Your face gets all crinkled up." Jack forced a smile. "Sorry, baby. Just thinking about the day ahead." After walking Lily to school, a routine he cherished despite it making him late for work more often than not, Jack caught the bus to Morrison Industrial Supply, where he'd worked for the past 18 months. The job wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, and steady was everything when you had a child depending on you. The warehouse smelled of cardboard dust and industrial cleaning supplies. Jack lost himself in the rhythm of lifting, sorting, and stacking, his mind wandering, as his body performed the familiar motions. He thought about Lily's parent-teacher conference next week, the electric bill that was 15 days past due, and whether he could pick up another weekend shift to help catch up on expenses. During his lunch break, he sat alone in the break room, eating a peanut butter sandwich and drinking coffee from a thermos that had been Rachel's. The other workers talked about sports politics and weekend plans that involved expenses Jack couldn't afford. He listened with half an ear, more focused on the calculations running through his head: rent, utilities, groceries, Lily's school supplies, the growing stack of medical bills from Rachel's treatment that insurance hadn't covered. "You okay, Reynolds?" asked Walter Jenkins, the 70-year-old security guard who patrolled the warehouse. Despite his age, Walter stood ramrod straight, his military bearing evident in every movement. The older man had taken a liking to Jack, perhaps recognizing another soul who'd seen his share of life's hardships. Just the usual, Jack replied with a shrug. Nothing that can't be handled. Walter's eyes, still sharp beneath bushy gray eyebrows, studied him thoughtfully. You know, son, I've watched a lot of men come through those warehouse doors in my time. Most of them just putting in hours until something better comes along. But you work like a man with purpose. Jack managed a tired smile. My purpose is about 3 feet tall and loves dolphins. Walter nodded understanding immediately. Your little girl, how's she doing? Better than me most days. Stronger than she should have to be. Kids are resilient, Walter said, lowering himself carefully into the chair across from Jack. But they shouldn't have to be. Not at her age. He paused, his weathered hands wrapping around his own coffee mug. Navy, right? I remember you mentioned serving. Jack nodded. 8 years. Submarine service. Weapons systems technician. Thought so. Got that look about you, the kind that sizes up a situation before making a move. Walter leaned forward slightly. Listen, Reynolds, I hear maintenance is looking for someone with technical know-how. Pays better than warehouse work. Might be worth looking into. I appreciate the tip, Jack said, glancing at his watch. His break was nearly over, and the afternoon's workload wouldn't move itself. Walter stood with the deliberate care of a man who knew his body's limitations, but refused to be governed by them. Just something to think about. A man with your skills shouldn't be spending his life stacking boxes. As the afternoon stretched endlessly, punctuated by the mechanical sounds of forklifts and conveyor belts, Jack's supervisor approached him near quitting time. Reynolds, I've got some overtime available this weekend if you're interested. Double time on Sunday. Jack nodded immediately. I'll take it. Figured you would. You're one of the most reliable guys I've got. The supervisor hesitated. If anything better comes along, you let me know. Okay, you deserve more than this place can offer. The compliment warmed Jack more than his supervisor probably realized. Recognition of his work ethic and character meant something even in a job that felt temporary and insufficient. When his shift ended, Jack checked his watch. He had just enough time to make it to Lily's after-school program at the community center if he hurried. The program was free, staffed by volunteers, and populated by children whose parents worked multiple jobs or struggled to make ends meet. Jack's pace quickened as he approached the modern downtown area, a stark contrast to the industrial district he'd left behind. Glass skyscrapers stretched toward the heavens, housing corporations whose annual holiday parties probably cost more than his yearly salary. He'd never paid much attention to these monuments to wealth and success, focused instead on the practical concerns of daily survival. As he waited at a crosswalk opposite Black Star Technologies' gleaming headquarters, his attention was caught by a commotion on the sidewalk ahead. A crowd had begun to gather around something or someone on the ground. Jack's Navy training kicked in immediately, and he found himself pushing forward through the circle of onlookers who were more focused on recording with their phones than offering assistance. On the cold pavement lay a woman in her early 50s, elegantly dressed in a tailored gray suit. Her face had taken on an alarming bluish tinge, and she was clutching at her chest, gasping for air. Without hesitation, Jack dropped his lunchbox and knelt beside her. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" he asked, his voice calm and authoritative, the same voice that had directed emergency drills on a nuclear submarine. When she didn't respond, he loosened her silk scarf and checked her pulse. It was rapid and irregular. "Has anyone called 911?" he called out to the gathering crowd. A few murmurs indicated someone had, but Jack wasn't taking chances. He pointed to a young man in a business suit. "Call 911 now and tell them we have a woman approximately 50 years old experiencing what appears to be cardiac arrest." Jack's mind flashed back to his Navy medical training. He positioned himself properly and began chest compressions, maintaining a steady rhythm while counting under his breath. The woman's eyes fluttered briefly, a flash of confusion and fear visible before they closed again. "Stay with me," he said, firmly continuing the compressions. "Help is coming. You just need to stay with me." As he worked, Jack became aware of something hard beneath his hands, not the woman's sternum, but an object in her jacket pocket. With one hand, he carefully extracted what turned out to be an elegant woman's watch that had apparently been dislodged by his compressions. He quickly set it aside on the pavement beside him, focusing entirely on keeping the woman alive. Minutes that felt like hours passed before the wail of sirens announced the arrival of the paramedics. They moved with practiced efficiency, taking over CPR and quickly assessing the situation. "Good work," one of them told Jack. "You kept her going. What's your name?" But Jack had already stepped back into the dispersing crowd, retrieving his lunchbox from where he'd dropped it. Almost as an afterthought, he picked up the woman's watch from the pavement, intending to hand it to the paramedics. But in the commotion of loading the woman into the ambulance, the opportunity slipped away, and Jack found himself still holding the timepiece as the ambulance doors closed. He stared down at the watch in his hand, a beautiful piece with a mother-of-pearl face and delicate hands that continued their steady march around the dial, oblivious to how time had nearly run out for their owner. Jack carefully pocketed the watch, making a mental note to turn it into the hospital later. Right now, he was already late to pick up Lily. The steady beeping of medical equipment filled the private hospital room as Eleanor Blackwell slowly emerged from the fog of sedation. Her first conscious thought wasn't about Blackstar's stock price or the board meeting she'd missed, but about the stranger's hands that had pressed against her chest, keeping her heart beating when it had decided to stop. The memory was fragmented, the sudden crushing pain, the inability to breathe, then strong, gentle hands and a calm voice telling her to hang on. "Ms. Blackwell, how are you feeling, doctor?" Claire Sullivan, chief of cardiology, approached the bed with the measured steps of someone who delivered both miraculous news and devastating diagnoses daily. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and her eyes held the kind of compassion that came from years of seeing people at their most vulnerable. "Like a truck hit me," Eleanor managed, her voice raspy from the intubation. She tried to sit up, but the doctor's firm hand guided her back down. "That's to be expected. You suffered a massive myocardial infarction, a heart attack. Without immediate intervention, the outcome could have been very different." Dr. Sullivan pulled up a chair, settling in for what Eleanor sensed would be a serious conversation. "The paramedics said a bystander performed CPR until they arrived. That person saved your life." Eleanor's fingers unconsciously went to her chest, where she could feel the tender spots where compressions had kept her blood flowing. "Do we know who it was?" "The paramedics didn't get a name. He helped them load you into the ambulance, then quietly left. Hospital policy is to report such incidents to our security office, but by the time they arrived at the scene, he was gone." Before Eleanor could respond, her phone buzzed insistently on the bedside table. The outside world was already intruding, demanding her attention despite her brush with mortality. Dr. Sullivan frowned at the device. "Ms. Blackwell, I need you to understand something. This wasn't a minor episode. Your heart stopped beating for nearly 2 minutes. You're alive because a stranger refused to walk away when he could have. But more importantly, this is a warning. Your lifestyle, the stress levels you maintain, the hours you work, they're not sustainable." Eleanor had built Blackstar Technologies from a small family business into a multinational corporation worth billions. She was known for her 16-hour workdays, her refusal to delegate critical decisions, and her ability to outwork competitors half her age. The idea of slowing down felt foreign, almost insulting. "I have responsibilities," she said weakly. "The company will survive without you for a few days while you recover. But if you don't make changes, you might not survive another episode like this one." Dr. Sullivan leaned forward, her expression serious. "You're 52 years old, Eleanor. You could have 30 more good years ahead of you, but only if you learn to live differently." Over the next several hours, Eleanor's hospital room filled with concerned executives, assistants, and board members. They spoke in hushed tones about market reactions, contingency plans, and the importance of projecting strength to shareholders. Eleanor listened with half an ear, her mind repeatedly returning to the moment on the sidewalk, the feeling of strong hands pressing against her chest, the calm voice that had somehow penetrated her panic. "We need to find him," she said, suddenly interrupting a discussion about quarterly projections. "Find who?" asked Richard Davenport, her chief operating officer and closest business confidant. At 55, Richard had been with Blackstar almost since its inception, his quiet competence the perfect complement to Eleanor's visionary leadership. "The man who saved me. I need to thank him properly." "Eleanor, I'm sure he was just doing what anyone would do," Richard began, but she cut him off with a look that her employees knew well. "How many people walked past me on that sidewalk before he stopped? How many saw a woman having a heart attack and decided it wasn't their problem? Eleanor's voice grew stronger as she spoke. This man didn't just save my life, he restored my faith in humanity. I need to find him. Within hours, Eleanor's security team had obtained the hospital's surveillance footage from the emergency department. The cameras had captured the ambulance's arrival, but provided limited views of the street scene. However, they managed to identify several angles that showed the Good Samaritan, a man in work clothes who appeared to be in his late 30s, with kind eyes and hands that moved with confidence and purpose. Can we enhance this image? Eleanor asked, studying the grainy footage on her laptop. We're working with the city's traffic cameras and nearby business security systems, replied the head of security. We should be able to piece together a clearer picture of what happened and possibly track his movements. Meanwhile, Jack Reynolds was going about his normal routine, completely unaware that he'd become the subject of an intensive search. He'd returned to work the day after the incident, mentioned it briefly to Walter during lunch, and otherwise treated it as just another day. When Lily asked about the sick lady he'd helped, he simply told her that sometimes people needed help and it was important to do what you could. Did she get better? Lily asked over dinner. Her fork paused halfway to her mouth. I hope so, sweetheart. The paramedics took good care of her. Mommy always said that helping people was the most important thing we could do, Lily said thoughtfully. She said it's how we make the world a little bit better. Jack smiled, remembering Rachel's endless capacity for compassion. She'd volunteered at the hospital where she worked as a nurse, even on her days off, helped elderly neighbors with their groceries, and never passed a homeless person without acknowledging their humanity. Her death had been devastating, not just to their family, but to their entire community, which had lost one of its brightest lights. That evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Jack sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and the woman's watch he'd picked up from the pavement. He hadn't had time to drop it off at the hospital, and now he examined it more closely. It was clearly expensive, the kind of timepiece that cost more than he made in several months. The brand name on the face, Patek Philippe, was one he vaguely recognized as high-end. On impulse, he turned the watch over. There, engraved on the back in elegant script, were the words, "For E.B., it's never too late to begin again." Jack froze the coffee mug halfway to his lips. Those words, "It's never too late to begin again," had been Rachel's mantra during her illness. When the treatments had failed one after another, when hope seemed lost, she'd repeat those words to him like a promise. Even on her final day, she'd whispered them to him, her voice barely audible, but her conviction undiminished. What were the odds that this watch belonging to a stranger he'd helped on a random sidewalk would bear Rachel's exact words? Jack carefully set the watch down on the table. A strange feeling washing over him, not quite déjà vu, but something akin to it, as if the universe were trying to send him a message through this bizarre coincidence. He picked up the worn family photo that always sat on the kitchen counter and studied Rachel's smiling face. "What are you trying to tell me?" he whispered to the photograph. But Rachel's image only smiled back, as enigmatic in death as she'd sometimes been in life. Jack's sleep that night was restless, filled with dreams of Rachel and the woman from the sidewalk, their faces sometimes blending together in the strange logic of dreams. When morning came, he rose with the sun, the watch sitting on his nightstand where he'd placed it before bed. He'd decided to take it to the police station on his way to work, letting them handle its return to its rightful owner. But as he prepared Lily's lunch for school, the news playing softly on their small kitchen television caught his attention. Blackstar Technologies CEO Eleanor Blackwell is in stable condition following a heart attack yesterday outside the company's downtown headquarters, the news anchor was saying. In a statement released by the company, Ms. Blackwell expressed gratitude to the unidentified man who performed CPR until paramedics arrived, crediting him with saving her life. Blackstar has established a hotline for anyone with information about the Good Samaritan's identity. The screen showed a photograph of Eleanor Blackwell, the same woman Jack had helped on the sidewalk. He stared at the image, connecting the dots slowly. EB, the initials on the watch. Eleanor Blackwell, the CEO of one of the city's largest technology companies, had been the woman lying on the pavement, her life in his hands. "Daddy, why are you staring at the TV like that?" Lily asked, appearing in the kitchen doorway with her backpack already on. Jack quickly turned off the television. "Just a story about someone I helped yesterday." "The sick lady, is she famous?" "Something like that," Jack said, his mind still processing the connection. "Come on, sunshine, we don't want to be late for school." As they walked to Lily's school hand in hand through the quiet morning streets, Jack found himself wondering about Eleanor Blackwell and her watch with Rachel's words engraved on the back. What were the chances? And why did it feel like more than mere coincidence? "Daddy, can we get ice cream after school today?" Lily's question pulled him from his thoughts. "It's not Friday," Jack reminded her gently. Their tradition was ice cream on Fridays, a small luxury he budgeted for carefully. "I know, but you look like you need ice cream today," she said with the simple wisdom of childhood. "Mommy always said ice cream fixes everything except cavities." Jack laughed despite his preoccupation. "Your mom was pretty smart about most things." "So, is that a yes?" "We'll see," he said, but this time his standard non-answer carried a note of possibility rather than deferral. When he arrived at work, Walter Jenkins was waiting by the time clock, his aged face creased with excitement. "Reynolds, you didn't tell me it was Eleanor Blackwell you saved yesterday." Jack swiped his card, frowning slightly. "How did you know about that?" "It's all over the news, son. Blackstar Technologies is looking for you. They've got a hotline and everything." Walter lowered his voice, though no one else was in the break room yet. "That company's worth billions. I bet there's a hefty reward waiting for whoever identifies you." Jack shook his head. "I didn't do it for a reward, Walter. I did it because she needed help." "I know that," Walter said, his expression softening. "That's what makes you different from most folks these days. But there's nothing wrong with accepting gratitude when it's offered, especially when it might help that little girl of yours." Jack considered this as he went about his morning tasks. The thought of a reward hadn't crossed his mind. He'd simply reacted as he'd been trained to do. But Walter had a point. If there was some kind of compensation being offered, couldn't he accept it for Lily's sake? For the goldfish, she wanted the new shoes. She needed the college fund that remained empty. By lunchtime, Jack had made his decision. He approached his supervisor and asked for an extended lunch break, explaining the situation briefly. The supervisor, surprised but impressed, agreed immediately. "Take all the time you need, Reynolds. Saving the CEO of Blackstar Technologies isn't something that happens every day." Jack took a bus downtown, the woman's watch secure in his pocket. The Blackstar Technologies building loomed above him, its glass exterior reflecting the clouds that had begun to gather overhead. For a moment he hesitated on the sidewalk, feeling out of place in his work clothes, amid the stream of well-dressed professionals entering and exiting the building. At the security desk in the lobby, he cleared his throat nervously. "I'm here about Eleanor Blackwell," he told the guard. "I think I'm the person she's looking for." The guard looked skeptical until Jack produced the watch from his pocket. "I found this during the incident. It belongs to Ms. Blackwell." The guard's eyes widened slightly, and he picked up his phone. Within minutes, Jack found himself being escorted to an elevator that required a special key card to operate. As they ascended to the executive floor, Jack felt increasingly uncomfortable, aware of his worn work boots and the faint smell of warehouse dust that clung to his clothes. The elevator opened directly into a reception area where a surprised-looking assistant rose from behind an elegant desk. "Mr. Reynolds is here regarding Ms. Blackwell," the security guard explained, handing the watch to the assistant. "Please have a seat," she told Jack, gesturing to a sleek leather sofa that probably cost more than his monthly rent. "Ms. Blackwell is actually resting at home following her hospitalization, but Mr. Davenport is here. He's been handling the search for you." Before Jack could respond, a door opened and a tall, distinguished-looking man in his mid-50s emerged. His expensive suit and carefully groomed silver hair marked him as someone accustomed to power and privilege, but his expression was genuinely warm as he approached Jack with an extended hand. "Mr. Reynolds, I'm Richard Davenport, COO of Blackstar Technologies. I can't tell you how pleased we are to finally meet you." Jack stood accepting the handshake with a firm grip that seemed to impress Davenport. "I just came to return Ms. Blackwell's watch," he explained. "I picked it up during the incident, but there wasn't time to give it to the paramedics." Davenport accepted the watch from the assistant, examining it with visible relief. "Eleanor will be thrilled. This watch has enormous sentimental value to her." He gestured toward his office. "Please come in. I'd like to speak with you privately." Jack followed Davenport into a spacious corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. He remained standing despite Davenport's invitation to sit in one of the leather chairs facing the massive desk. Mr. Reynolds, what you did for Eleanor, for all of us here at Black Star, is beyond measure. The doctors are quite clear without your immediate intervention, she would not have survived. I just did what anyone with the training would do, Jack said, uncomfortable with the praise. But that's just it, Davenport said, leaning against his desk. You didn't hesitate when others stood by. That kind of decisive action, that willingness to take responsibility, it's rare. He studied Jack thoughtfully. You were in the military, weren't you? Navy, 8 years, submarine service. Davenport nodded as if this confirmed something. Eleanor was very specific about wanting to thank you personally. Would you be willing to meet with her? Once she's recovered enough for visitors, of course. Jack shifted his weight, glancing at his watch. I should really get back to work. My lunch break is almost over. Where do you work, if you don't mind my asking? Morrison Industrial Supply. I'm in inventory management. A diplomatic way of saying warehouse worker, and from Davenport's expression, he understood exactly what Jack meant. I see. Well, I won't keep you, but please. He reached into his jacket and produced a business card, offering it to Jack. Take my direct number. Eleanor would very much like to express her gratitude in person when she's able. And of course, Black Star would like to offer you a reward for your actions. Jack accepted the card reluctantly. That's really not necessary. Nevertheless, we insist. Davenport's tone was friendly but firm. Now, can we call you a car to take you back to work? It's the least we can do. The bus is fine, Jack said, already backing toward the door. Just tell Ms. Blackwell I'm glad she's okay. As the elevator descended to the lobby, Jack stared at Davenport's business card, turning it over in his fingers. The sleek black card with its embossed silver logo represented a world so different from his own that it might as well have been from another planet. Yet somehow, through a bizarre twist of fate, his life had intersected with that alien world in a way that couldn't be easily dismissed or forgotten. When he returned to the warehouse, Walter was waiting expectantly by the loading dock, his weathered face alight with curiosity. Well, what happened? Did you meet her? Did they give you a reward? Jack shook his head, resuming his work, checking inventory on a shipment of industrial valves. She wasn't there, still recovering at home. I just returned her watch. Walter's disappointment was palpable. That's it. After you saved her life. That's it, Jack confirmed, though he didn't mention Davenport's invitation or the promised reward. Something about the whole situation made him uncomfortable, as if by accepting anything from Black Star, he'd be acknowledging how desperate his circumstances truly were. That evening, as promised, Jack took Lily for ice cream after picking her up from the after-school program. They sat together at a small table outside the ice cream parlor, Lily swinging her legs happily as she tackled a chocolate sundae almost as big as her head. Daddy, if you could have any wish, what would it be? She asked suddenly, looking up from her ice cream, with chocolate smeared across her chin. Jack considered the question seriously as he did all of Lily's inquiries. I don't know, Sunshine. What would your wish be? I'd wish for Mommy to come back, she said without hesitation. But since that can't happen, I'd wish for you to not look so tired all the time. Her answer caught him off guard. Had he been that transparent? He'd tried so hard to shield her from his exhaustion, his constant worry about money, his fear of failing her. I'm not that tired, he protested weakly. Lily gave him a look that was pure Rachel, skeptical, loving, and impossibly wise. Yes, you are. You work too hard, like Mommy's friend, Mrs. Peterson, said. You need someone to help you sometimes. Jack remembered Karen Peterson, one of Rachel's fellow nurses who had checked in on them occasionally after the funeral. She'd stopped coming around eventually, perhaps sensing Jack's discomfort with what had felt like charity. I have you to help me, he said, reaching across the table to wipe the chocolate from Lily's chin. You're the best helper anyone could ask for. Lily beamed at the praise, but her expression quickly turned serious again. Daddy, did you lose something today? You keep checking your pocket. Jack hadn't realized he'd been doing it, periodically patting the pocket where Eleanor Blackwell's watch had been, as if to reassure himself it was still there. Except now, of course, it wasn't. Just making sure I didn't forget my wallet, he lied, not wanting to explain the watch and its connection to Rachel's words. You're silly, Lily giggled. Your wallet is right there on the table. Jack smiled, grateful for her laughter. You caught me. I guess I am a little tired after all. Later that night, after Lily was asleep, Jack sat at their kitchen table with Davenport's business card propped against the salt shaker. The sensible thing would be to call to accept whatever gratitude Blackstar wanted to offer. It could make a real difference for Lily, maybe even enough to move to a better apartment in a safer neighborhood with better schools. But something held him back. Pride, perhaps. Or the feeling that accepting help meant admitting defeat, acknowledging that he couldn't provide for his daughter on his own. Rachel would have told him he was being stubborn, that there was no shame in accepting kindness when it was genuinely offered. "What would you do?" he asked the family photograph, studying Rachel's smiling face, as if it might suddenly animate and offer advice. But the photograph remained silent, and Jack was left alone with his thoughts in the business card that represented a decision he wasn't yet ready to make. The next morning dawned gray and rainy, matching Jack's mood as he prepared for another day at the warehouse. Lily was unusually quiet during breakfast, pushing her cereal around the bowl without much enthusiasm. "Everything okay, sunshine?" he asked, concerned by her silence. "I don't feel very good," she admitted. "My tummy hurts." Jack placed a hand on her forehead, relieved to find it cool. "Not a fever, then. Do you think you're well enough for school? You can stay home if you need to." Lily considered this, her small face screwed up in concentration. "I think I should go. We're starting our community helpers project today, and I want to do mine on nurses like Mommy." "That's my brave girl," Jack said, his chest tightening with pride and sadness in equal measure. "But if you start feeling worse, have Mrs. Rodriguez call me. Okay, I'll come pick you up right away." Lily nodded solemnly. "Promise you won't get in trouble at work." "I know your boss gets mad when you have to leave early." "I promise," Jack assured her, though he wasn't entirely certain he could keep that promise. His supervisor had been understanding about yesterday's extended lunch break, but another absence so soon might push his patience too far. After dropping Lily at school, Jack hurried to catch his bus, arriving at the warehouse, just as Walter was unlocking the security gate. "Morning, Reynolds," the older man greeted him. "Heard anything from your billionaire friend yet?" Jack shook his head, not bothering to correct Walter's characterization of Eleanor Blackwell. "Not expecting to." Walter made a disapproving sound. "Seems to me a woman worth billions could at least send a thank you note to the man who saved her life." "It's been less than 48 hours, Walter, and she was just released from the hospital yesterday, according to the news." "Still worsting," Walter persisted, following Jack into the warehouse. "Folks with that kind of money, they've got people to handle these things. Send flowers, arrange meetings, write checks." He lowered his voice conspiratorially. "My nephew works security at Westlake Hospital. Says they had a whole wing cleared for her private nurses, the works. Must be nice to have that kind of clout." Jack merely nodded, unwilling to engage in speculation about Eleanor Blackwell's wealth or influence. He had work to do, and dwelling on yesterday's encounter wouldn't help him complete it any faster. The morning passed slowly, the rhythm of inventory checks and forklift operations familiar enough to allow Jack's mind to wander. He found himself thinking about the watch and its inscription. What was the story behind those words? Had Eleanor Blackwell also faced some crisis that required beginning it again? And why did the universe seem determined to connect their lives through Rachel's mantra? Just before lunch, Jack's phone vibrated in his pocket, a call from an unknown number. Normally, he would let it go to voicemail, wary of collection agencies and scammers. But something compelled him to answer. "Is this Jack Reynolds?" a woman's voice asked, cultured and authoritative, despite a slight raspiness. "Yes," he confirmed cautiously. "Who's this Eleanor Blackwell?" The name hung in the air between them, charged with significance. "Richard Davenport gave me your number." "I hope that's all right." Jack stepped into a quiet corner of the warehouse away from the noise of machinery. "It's fine. How are you feeling, Miss Blackwell?" "Better, thanks to you." There was a pause, and Jack could hear papers rustling in the background. "Mr. Reynolds, I'd very much like to meet you in person to thank you properly for what you did. Would that be possible?" Jack hesitated, torn between curiosity about this woman who somehow connected to Rachel and his instinctive wariness of getting involved with someone from such a different world. "I understand your reluctance," Eleanor continued, misinterpreting his silence. "But please, it would mean a great deal to me. Just a brief meeting at a time and place of your choosing." Before Jack could respond, his supervisor's voice called from across the warehouse. "Reynolds' phone call at the front desk, your daughter's school." Jack's heart lurched. Ms. Blackwell, I have to go. It's my daughter's school calling. Of course, Eleanor said quickly. Is everything all right? I don't know yet. I'll have to call you back. Jack ended the call and hurried to the front desk, his mind racing with possibilities, none of them good. The school secretary's voice was reassuringly calm. Mr. Reynolds Lily's feeling quite ill. She's been vomiting and complains of stomach pain. We think it would be best if you came to pick her up. I'll be right there, Jack promised, already calculating the fastest route to the school and how much time he'd lose from his shift. His supervisor, overhearing the conversation, gave him a nod that conveyed both permission and sympathy. Family comes first, Reynolds. Go take care of your girl. 20 minutes later, Jack was helping a pale and miserable Lily into a taxi, an expense he couldn't really afford, but the bus would take too long, and she clearly needed to be home in bed. I'm sorry, Daddy, she whispered, leaning against him in the back seat. I tried to be brave like you said. You have nothing to be sorry for, Sunshine, he assured her, his arm protectively around her small shoulders. Being brave doesn't mean pretending you are not sick when you are. At home, Jack settled Lily on the couch with a blanket and a bucket nearby just in case. Her color was poor, and she'd thrown up again in the taxi, leaving Jack to apologize profusely and pay extra for the cleanup. He took her temperature, 100.1, not dangerously high, but definitely a fever. Probably just a stomach bug, he told himself. Kids got them all the time. No need to panic. But as the afternoon wore on, Lily's condition worsened. Her fever climbed to 102, and she cried out with pain when Jack gently pressed on her lower right abdomen. Alarm bells rang in his head. These were the symptoms Rachel had always warned him about, the ones that signaled appendicitis. Lily, honey, I think we need to go to the hospital, he told her, trying to keep his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. No, she whimpered, clutching her stuffed dolphin closer. Hospitals are where Mommy went and didn't come back. The simple statement, delivered with such raw fear, nearly broke Jack's heart. This is different, Sunshine. This is just to make your tummy feel better. I promise I won't leave you for a second. He called another taxi, mentally calculating how much this was going to cost. The taxi, the emergency room visit, probably tests, and maybe even surgery, if it was appendicitis, thousands of dollars that he simply didn't have, even with the basic health insurance his job provided. As they waited for the taxi, Jack's phone rang again, the same unknown number from earlier. Eleanor Blackwell. He almost let it go to voicemail, but then thought better of it. Maybe this was the universe offering help when he needed it most. Miss Blackwell. He answered, his voice tight with worry. Mr. Reynolds, I wanted to follow up. Is everything all right with your daughter? No, he admitted, watching Lily curl into a tighter ball on the couch, her face pinched with pain. She's sick, might be appendicitis. I'm taking her to the emergency room now. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. Which hospital? Westlake, Jack said, naming the closest facility to their apartment. I see. Eleanor's voice took on a different quality, focused, decisive. Mr. Reynolds, I'm sending my personal physician to meet you there. Dr. Sullivan is one of the best diagnosticians in the city. She'll ensure Lily gets immediate attention. Jack's first instinct was to refuse to insist they would be fine on their own, that he didn't need her help. But one look at Lily's pale face silenced his pride. Thank you, he said simply. That would be very helpful. It's the least I can do. And Mr. Reynolds, don't worry about the costs. I'll take care of everything. Before Jack could respond, the taxi honked outside. I have to go, he told Eleanor. The taxi's here. Go, she said. Dr. Sullivan will be waiting for you. As Jack helped Lily into the taxi, he felt a strange mixture of gratitude and unease. Accepting Eleanor Blackwell's help felt like crossing a threshold, acknowledging that he couldn't do everything alone, that sometimes fate intervened in ways that couldn't be predicted or controlled. Daddy, who were you talking to? Lily asked weakly as the taxi pulled away from the curb. Someone who wants to help us, Jack said, holding her close. Someone who understands what it means to begin again. The taxi merged into traffic, carrying them toward a future suddenly veering in unexpected directions. And in Jack's pocket, Eleanor Blackwell's business card seemed to pulse with significance, like a key to a door he hadn't known existed until now. The emergency room at Westlake Hospital was typically chaotic on a rainy Thursday afternoon, a cacophony of beeping monitors, hurried conversations, and the underlying current of human suffering. Jack had braced himself for hours of waiting, But as soon as he gave Lily's name at the registration desk, the atmosphere shifted perceptibly. "Mr. Reynolds, we've been expecting you," the intake nurse said, her demeanor professional, but markedly more attentive than the harried efficiency she'd shown the family ahead of them. "Dr. Sullivan is already here. We'll take Lily back immediately." Jack felt the stares of other waiting patients as a wheelchair appeared for Lily, who was now pale and listless, her earlier tears replaced by a worrying lethargy. He understood their resentment. He'd have felt the same watching someone bypass the hours-long wait he'd endured during Rachel's illness. "My dad comes too," Lily insisted weakly when the nurse tried to separate them for initial assessment. "Of course he does," came a confident voice from the doorway to the treatment area. A woman in her mid-40s with auburn hair and intelligent eyes approached, introducing herself with a firm handshake. "I'm Dr. Claire Sullivan. Eleanor Blackwell asked me to oversee Lily's care personally." There was something vaguely familiar about her, but Jack couldn't place it. He'd met so many doctors during Rachel's illness that they'd begun to blur together in his memory. "Thank you," he managed, his throat tight with worry, as he followed Lily's wheelchair through double doors into the treatment area. What followed was medical care unlike anything Jack had experienced, swift, thorough, and conducted with an authority that brooked no delays. Within 20 minutes, Lily had been examined, blood drawn, and wheeled to radiology for an ultrasound. Dr. Sullivan stayed close, her manner with Lily gentle but direct, explaining each step in terms an 8-year-old could understand. "It is appendicitis," she confirmed when the tests were complete, showing Jack the ultrasound image. "The appendix is inflamed but hasn't ruptured. We'll need to perform surgery within the next hour." "Surgery," Jack's voice caught. Despite knowing this was likely, hearing it confirmed made his heart race. "Laparoscopic appendectomy," Dr. Sullivan clarified. "Minimally invasive, 3 small incisions. Lily will likely go home tomorrow, back to school within a week." "Will it hurt a lot?" Lily asked in a small voice, clutching her dolphin tighter. Dr. Sullivan sat on the edge of the bed, her professional demeanor softening. "It will hurt some," she said honestly, "but we have excellent medicine to manage that pain, and you'll feel much better once that angry appendix is out." As nurses prepared Lily for surgery, Dr. Sullivan drew Jack aside. "Eleanor told me about what you did for her," she said quietly. "It seems the universe has a certain symmetry, doesn't it?" "I'm grateful for the help," Jack acknowledged, "but I don't want charity." Something flickered in Dr. Sullivan's eyes, recognition, perhaps, or respect. "This isn't charity, Mr. Reynolds. It's reciprocity. You saved Eleanor's life without hesitation or expectation of reward. She's simply responding in kind." Before Jack could reply, the surgical team arrived to take Lily to the operating room. He bent to kiss her forehead, fighting to keep his voice steady. "I'll be right here when you wake up, sunshine. The doctors are going to make you all better. Promise you won't leave." Lily's eyes, so like Rachel's, were wide with fear. "Not for a second," he vowed. "Remember what Mommy used to say about being brave." A ghost of a smile touched Lily's pale lips. "Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do what needs doing anyway." "That's my girl." Jack squeezed her hand, then forced himself to step back and let the surgical team wheel her away. It was one of the hardest things he'd ever done, standing still while his child was taken from him, entrusted to strangers who would cut into her small body while she slept. Dr. Sullivan touched his arm lightly. "She's in excellent hands, Mr. Reynolds. Dr. Chen is the best pediatric surgeon in the state. I've arranged for you to wait in a private consultation room rather than the general waiting area. Can I have someone bring you coffee, something to eat?" Jack shook his head, unable to imagine putting food in his stomach while Lily was in surgery. "Just coffee, please. Black." The private waiting room was a stark contrast to the crowded public space, quiet with comfortable furniture and soft lighting. Jack paced its confines restlessly, too anxious to sit. Through the window he could see rain lashing against the glass, the weather matching his turbulent emotions. He'd been there perhaps 15 minutes when the door opened and Eleanor Blackwell stepped into the room. Even fresh from her own hospitalization, she carried herself with unmistakable authority, though Jack noted the careful way she moved, as if her body were made of something fragile and precious. Her silver-streaked dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore a tailored pantsuit that probably cost more than his monthly rent. "Mr. Reynolds," she said, her voice carrying the same slight raspiness he'd heard on the phone. "I hope you don't mind my coming. I wanted to make sure you and Lily had everything you needed. Jack stopped pacing, suddenly aware of his rumpled work clothes and the day's stubble on his jaw. Miss Blackwell, I didn't expect you to come in person. Eleanor, please. She gestured to the seating area. May I join you? I'm afraid I'm still under doctor's orders to rest frequently. Jack nodded, taking the chair opposite her. Up close, he could see the strain of her recent ordeal in the faint shadows beneath her eyes, and the careful way she lowered herself into the chair. How is Lily? She asked, genuine concern in her voice. In surgery. Appendicitis like I feared. Jack ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit Rachel had always teased him about. Dr. Sullivan says it should be straightforward. Eleanor nodded. Claire is excellent, both as a physician and a human being. She was my cardiologist during my incident. I trust her implicitly. A silence fell between them, neither awkward nor comfortable, simply the quiet of two strangers connected by circumstance, but separated by nearly everything else. I brought your watch back yesterday, Jack said finally, to your office. Yes, Richard told me. Thank you. Eleanor's hand went instinctively to her wrist, which Jack now noticed was bare. It means a great deal to me. The inscription, Jack began, then hesitated, unsure how to frame the question. Eleanor seemed to understand what he was asking. It's never too late to begin again, she quoted softly. A reminder I needed at a difficult time in my life. She studied his face. Those words mean something to you as well, don't they? Jack nodded, his throat suddenly tight. My wife Rachel, before she died, it was something she used to say. Understanding dawned in Eleanor's eyes. I'm sorry for your loss, Jack. Truly. She paused, something like hesitation crossing her features, an expression that seemed at odds with her confident demeanor. May I ask, how long ago? 2 years, 3 months, and 17 days, Jack answered without needing to calculate. The count was automatic, like breathing. Cancer, she was a nurse actually. Pediatric oncology. At this hospital. No, over at Mercy General. Jack stopped, a memory suddenly surfacing. Wait, did you say your doctor's name is Claire Sullivan? Eleanor nodded, watching him curiously. Rachel mentioned her sometimes. They worked together on some cases, children with heart conditions, secondary to cancer treatments. Jack shook his head, amazed at the connection. It's a small world. Smaller than we realize, Eleanor agreed. She seemed about to say more when the door opened and Dr. Sullivan herself entered, still in surgical scrubs. Jack shot to his feet, his heart in his throat. Lily. The surgery went perfectly, Dr. Sullivan assured him immediately. Textbook laparoscopic appendectomy. No complications, no rupture. She's in recovery now and should be waking up soon. The relief that flooded through Jack was so intense it made his knees weak. He sank back into his chair, covering his face with his hands for a moment as he composed himself. Can I see her? He asked when he'd regained control. In about 20 minutes, Dr. Sullivan promised. They'll bring her to a private room rather than the recovery ward. I've arranged for a cot to be set up so you can stay with her tonight. Jack looked up, confused. Private room? I don't think my insurance... It's taken care of, Eleanor interjected gently. Please, Jack, let me do this. Jack wanted to refuse, the instinct to maintain his independence, to not accept help. He couldn't repay was deeply ingrained. But he thought of Lily, how much more comfortable she'd be in a private room, how much easier it would be for her to rest without the noise and disruption of a shared space. Thank you, he said finally, the words feeling inadequate for the magnitude of what she was offering. Dr. Sullivan glanced between them, a peculiar expression crossing her face. I'll come find you when Lily's settled in her room, she told Jack, then turned to Eleanor. And you should be resting yourself. Your heart needs time to heal. Eleanor made a dismissive gesture. I'm fine, Claire. I've been sitting quietly as prescribed. Nevertheless, Dr. Sullivan insisted, I'd like to check your vitals before you leave. Doctor's orders. When they were alone again, Jack found himself studying Eleanor more carefully. She didn't look like someone who'd nearly died 4 days ago. There was a vitality to her that seemed to defy her recent brush with mortality. The watch, he said, suddenly remembering something that had been nagging at him. How did you get it? The inscription, I mean. It's such a specific phrase. Eleanor's expression softened, becoming almost wistful. It was a gift from a nurse who cared for me during a particularly dark time. 3 years ago, I was hospitalized briefly for exhaustion. My marriage had just ended rather publicly and messily. Black Star's stock was plummeting due to a failed product launch, and I felt like everything I'd built was crumbling around me. She traced an invisible pattern on the arm of her chair, lost in the memory. There was this nurse, young but with an old soul. She had a way of cutting through all the noise, helping me see what really mattered. On my last day in the hospital, she gave me the watch. Said she'd noticed mine was broken and I shouldn't leave without a way to measure the new time I'd been given. Jack's heartbeat quickened. The timeline, the circumstances, it fit. This nurse, he said carefully, did she have dark hair, kind of wavy with a small birthmark here? He touched his right temple. Eleanor's eyes widened. Yes. How did you, Rachel? Jack said, his voice barely above a whisper. That was Rachel. My Rachel. The revelation hung between them, too significant to be mere coincidence, too perfect to be engineered. Jack fumbled for his wallet, extracting the worn family photo he always carried. Here, he said, passing it to Eleanor. This is her, with Lily just after she was born. Eleanor accepted the photograph with careful hands, studying it intently. Yes, she confirmed, her voice thick with emotion. That's her. Your wife gave me this watch. Your wife told me it was never too late to begin again. The full weight of the connection settled over them, the bizarre, beautiful symmetry of it. Rachel had helped Eleanor during her crisis 3 years ago. Now Eleanor was helping Rachel's family during theirs. And somehow, against all odds, Jack had been the one to save Eleanor's life on that sidewalk. She never told me, Jack said, shaking his head in wonder. She always had special patients, ones she connected with beyond the professional relationship. But she never mentioned you specifically. Patient confidentiality, perhaps, Eleanor suggested. Or maybe she didn't realize who I was. I wasn't exactly advertising my identity during that hospitalization. Before they could explore the connection further, a nurse appeared to escort Jack to Lily's room. Eleanor rose to leave, but Jack impulsively reached for her hand. Would you like to meet her, Lily, I mean? When she's a little more awake, I think Rachel would have wanted that. Eleanor's composure slipped for just a moment, revealing a vulnerability that seemed at odds with her public persona. I'd like that very much, Jack. Thank you. Lily's private room was on the pediatric floor, cheerfully decorated with ocean-themed murals that Jack knew would delight her when she was more alert. For now, she lay small and pale against the white sheets, an IV in one arm, and monitoring devices attached to her tiny finger. Daddy. Her voice was groggy, her eyes struggling to focus as Jack took the chair beside her bed. I'm right here, sunshine. Just like I promised. He stroked her hair, gently, careful of the IV and monitors. The doctors fixed your tummy. You're going to be just fine. It hurts, she murmured, her free hand moving toward her abdomen. I know, baby. But they're giving you medicine for the pain, and it will get better every day. Jack pressed a kiss to her forehead, overwhelmed with relief that the worst was over. Guess what? Oh, your room has dolphins painted on the walls, just like your favorite animal. A faint smile touched Lily's lips before she drifted back to sleep, the anesthesia still working its way through her system. Jack settled in the chair beside her, prepared for the long night ahead. But his mind was racing, trying to process the extraordinary connection between his family and Eleanor Blackwell. Rachel had always believed that there were no true coincidences, that the universe worked in patterns too complex for humans to fully comprehend. Everything circles back eventually, she'd told him once. The kindness you put into the world finds its way home. Jack had always considered it a poetic sentiment rather than a literal truth. But now, watching his daughter sleep while the rain tapped gently against the window, he wasn't so sure. How else could he explain the perfect symmetry of these events, the way past and present had woven together to create this moment? The next morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having passed during the night. Lily was much improved, sitting up in bed and eating Jell-O for breakfast when Dr. Sullivan came to check on her. Well, look at you, the doctor said, warmly examining Lily's vital signs. Someone's feeling better today. It still hurts when I move too much, Lily reported seriously, but Daddy says that's normal. When can I go home? If you keep improving like this, probably this afternoon. Dr. Sullivan told her, gently examining the small bandages covering Lily's incisions. These look excellent. You're healing like a champion. I'm tough, Lily declared proudly, like my mom was. Sure, bro. Sullivan's hands paused momentarily, and she glanced at Jack with a question in her eyes. He nodded slightly, confirming what Eleanor must have told her about Rachel. Your mom was one of the strongest people I ever knew. Dr. Sullivan said, her voice soft with genuine emotion. I worked with her sometimes at Mercy General. She helped many of my young heart patients. Lily's eyes widened. You knew my mom? I did. She was an exceptional nurse, smart, kind, and absolutely dedicated to her patients. Dr. Sullivan finished her examination and sat on the edge of Lily's bed. She would be very proud of how brave you've been. Lily processed this information with the solemn consideration children sometimes bring to profound revelations. Did she help you fix people's hearts? She did, in more ways than one. Dr. Sullivan rose, addressing Jack now. Barring any complications, Lily should be discharged around 2 this afternoon. I've already arranged for the paperwork. Don't worry about this billing. It's being handled separately. After she left, Lily peppered Jack with questions about her mother's work with Dr. Sullivan, hungry for any new connection to the mother she remembered more in fragments and photographs with each passing year. And the lady who sent Dr. Sullivan to help us, Lily asked finally, did Mom help her too? Jack hesitated, unsure how much to explain about the complex web of connections that had brought Eleanor Blackwell into their lives. Yes, he said finally. Mom helped her begin again when she was going through a hard time, and now she's helping us. Lily nodded, satisfied with this explanation in a way only children can be. That's what Mom always said. Helping people is like throwing a rock in a pond. The circles keep spreading out wider and wider. Jack smiled, recognizing Rachel's words in his daughter's mouth. That's right, sunshine. That's exactly right. Eleanor returned that afternoon, timing her visit to coincide with Lily's discharge. Jack had just finished helping Lily change into the clean clothes he'd retrieved from their apartment that morning when there was a soft knock at the door. Come in, he called, expecting a nurse with final instructions. Instead, Eleanor entered carrying a small gift bag and looking considerably more rested than she had the previous evening. She'd exchanged her pantsuit for more casual attire, dark jeans and a simple blouse that somehow still managed to look elegant. I hope I'm not interrupting, she said, hesitating in the doorway. Not at all, Jack assured her. Lily, this is Ms. Blackwell. She's the one who arranged for Dr. Sullivan to take care of you. Lily studied Eleanor with undisguised curiosity. You're the lady my daddy helped when your heart got sick, she stated rather than asked. Eleanor smiled, approaching the bed. That's right. Your daddy saved my life. He's good at helping people, Lily said with matter-of-fact pride. Mom taught him that. A shadow of emotion crossed Eleanor's face, quickly controlled. Your mom taught a lot of people important things. She offered the gift bag to Lily. I brought you something. I hope that's okay. Jack nodded his permission, and Lily accepted the bag eagerly. Inside was a beautiful stuffed dolphin, more realistic looking than the carnival prize version she currently owned, along with a children's book about marine biology filled with colorful photographs. Wow, Lily breathed, her eyes wide. Thank you, Daddy. Look at all the fish. That's very kind of you, Jack said, though Eleanor could hear the underlying concern in his voice. He was already worried about reciprocating such generosity. I remembered you said she loves dolphins, Eleanor explained to Jack, then turned to Lily. When I was your age, I wanted to be a marine biologist and study dolphins in the ocean. I thought you might like to learn about them too. As Lily explored her new book, Eleanor drew Jack aside. I've been thinking about our conversation last night, she said quietly, about Rachel and the connections between us. It feels like more than coincidence, doesn't it? Jack nodded, still processing the extraordinary chain of events that had brought them to this moment. Rachel would have called it cosmic symmetry. She believed everything happened for a reason, that there were no random encounters. And what do you believe, Jack? He considered the question seriously. I believe my wife helped you when you needed it. I believe I happened to be in the right place when you needed help again. And I believe you've gone above and beyond to help my daughter when she needed it. He shrugged slightly. Beyond that, I try not to overthink it. Eleanor smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her face from merely attractive to truly beautiful. A practical man. I respect that. She glanced at her watch, not the one with Rachel's words, Jack noticed, but something sleeker and more modern. I should let you get Lily home, but I'd like to continue our conversation if you're willing, perhaps once she's feeling better. Before Jack could respond, a hospital administrator appeared with Lily's discharge paperwork and a wheelchair to transport her to the exit as per hospital policy. The moment for private conversation was lost in the bustle of final instructions and preparations to leave. "I've arranged for a car to take you home," Eleanor told them as they reached the hospital entrance. "Unless you'd prefer a taxi." Jack started to decline his instinct to maintain independence still strong, but Lily's excited "a car like a fancy one" made him reconsider. After what she'd been through, didn't she deserve a small luxury? "Thank you," he said to Eleanor. "That would be helpful." The car turned out to be a sleek black SUV with tinted windows and a uniformed driver who loaded Lily's gifts in the small bag of medical supplies with practiced efficiency. Lily's eyes were wide with wonder as she settled into the plush leather seat. "Will we see you again?" she asked Eleanor as Jack helped her with the seatbelt. Eleanor glanced at Jack, clearly leaving the decision in his hands. "I hope so," she said carefully. "If your dad thinks that would be okay." Jack found himself nodding before he'd fully considered the implications. "I think we'd both like that." As the SUV pulled away from the curb, Jack watched Eleanor through the tinted window, standing straight and dignified despite her recent health scare. She raised a hand in farewell, and he found himself returning the gesture, a strange sense of anticipation mixing with his customary caution. The next week passed in a blur of recovery for Lily and catching up at work for Jack. His supervisor had been surprisingly understanding about his abrupt departure and subsequent day off, though Jack knew he'd need to make up the hours if he wanted his next paycheck to cover rent. Walter Jenkins had appointed himself unofficial guardian of Jack's reputation at the warehouse, quashing rumors and speculation with the authority that came from his advanced age and military background. "You did what any decent father would do," he told Jack gruffly when they shared lunch in the break room. "Family comes first. Anyone who says different isn't worth listening to." Jack appreciated the support, though he carefully avoided mentioning Eleanor Blackwell's involvement in Lily's care. The connection felt too personal, too complex to explain to someone who hadn't experienced the strange symmetry of it all. At home, Lily recovered with the resilience of childhood, proudly showing off her battle scars to Mrs. Rodriguez, their elderly neighbor who had been checking in on her while Jack worked. The stuffed dolphin from Eleanor, christened Echo, after a character in her new marine biology book, had become her constant companion, replacing the carnival prize version that had seen her through Rachel's illness. "When are we going to see Ms. Eleanor again?" Lily asked one evening as Jack prepared a simple dinner of spaghetti with sauce from a jar. "She said we would." Jack stirred the pasta thoughtfully. "I'm not sure, Sunshine. She's very busy with her company. But she's your friend now, right? Because you helped each other." The question gave Jack pause. Was Eleanor Blackwell his friend? They had shared an intense emotional connection through Rachel and their mutual acts of assistance. But friendship implied a relationship that transcended circumstance, something ongoing and voluntarily maintained. "It's complicated," he tried to explain. "Ms. Blackwell and I come from very different worlds." Lily considered this with the pragmatic logic of childhood. "But the earth is just one world. Mom always said people are people no matter what." Jack smiled despite himself. "Your mom was pretty smart about most things." "So you'll call Ms. Eleanor," Lily pressed, sensing an advantage. "She can come see my dolphin collection and maybe bring more books about the ocean." Before Jack could formulate a response that wouldn't crush Lily's enthusiasm while still maintaining realistic expectations, his phone rang, the same unknown number that had now become familiar. "Eleanor." "Speaking of," he murmured, showing Lily the screen before answering. "Hello. Jack, it's Eleanor Blackwell. I hope I'm not interrupting anything." "Just making dinner," he said, gesturing for Lily to set the table. "Spaghetti night." Eleanor's laugh was warm through the phone. "A Friday tradition in many households, I believe. How is Lily recovering?" "Remarkably well. Kids bounce back faster than adults, thankfully. She's back to her normal energy levels, though she's still on light activity restrictions for another week." "I'm glad to hear it." There was a pause, and Jack could almost picture Eleanor gathering her thoughts. "Jack, the reason I'm calling, I've been thinking about our conversation about Rachel and the connections between us. I'd like to propose something if you're open to it." Jack felt a flicker of wariness. "What kind of proposal?" A job, Eleanor said simply, at Black Star Technologies. The wooden spoon Jack had been using to stir the pasta sauce stilled in his hand. A job. What kind of job? Facilities coordinator for our main campus. It's a real position with real responsibilities overseeing maintenance safety protocols, building operations. The salary is $85,000 a year, plus comprehensive health insurance, dental, and a retirement plan. Jack's mind reeled at the figure, nearly 3 times what he currently made at the warehouse. It was enough to move to a better neighborhood, to start a college fund, for Lily to finally escape the constant financial anxiety that had become his unwelcome companion. "I don't understand," he said slowly. "What qualifications do I have for this kind of work?" "More than you might think," Eleanor replied. "Your Navy experience with complex systems, your problem-solving skills, your attention to detail. Richard Davenport reviewed your service record, outstanding evaluations, particularly in crisis management and technical proficiency. You're exactly the kind of person we need." Jack's grip tightened on the phone. "You looked into my service record." There was a brief pause. "Yes," Eleanor admitted. "I hope you're not offended. We do background checks on all potential employees, and given the circumstances of our meeting, I wanted to understand more about you." Jack wasn't sure how to feel about this revelation. On one hand, it was standard practice for high-level corporate positions. On the other, it represented an imbalance of information, Eleanor knowing far more about him than he did about her. "And if it doesn't work out," he asked, voicing his deepest concern, "if I'm not good at this kind of work, then we figure it out together," Eleanor said simply. "But Jack, I didn't build a multi-billion-dollar company by making bad decisions about people. I know talent when I see it, even if it comes in an unexpected package." Lily was watching him curiously from the table, sensing that something significant was happening. Jack turned slightly away, lowering his voice. "This feels like, I don't know, payment for what happened on the sidewalk." "It's not," Eleanor insisted. "This is me recognizing that you're exactly the kind of person I want working for my company. The fact that you saved my life just helped me realize it sooner." The pasta was beginning to boil over, demanding Jack's attention. "I need to think about this," he said finally. "It's a big change." "Of course, take all the time you need." There was a pause, and when Eleanor spoke again, her voice carried a note of vulnerability that surprised him. "But Jack, I meant what I said about wanting to continue our conversation. Whatever you decide about the job offer." After they hung up, Jack returned to dinner preparations, his mind churning with possibilities he'd never allowed himself to consider. A job that would provide financial security, health benefits, a future for Lily beyond month-to-month survival. It seemed too good to be true, the kind of opportunity that happened to other people, not to widowed warehouse workers living paycheck to paycheck. "Was that Ms. Eleanor?" Lily asked as he set a plate of spaghetti in front of her. "Is she coming to visit?" "Not tonight, sunshine. Jack hesitated, unsure how much to share. "She offered me a job at her company." Lily's eyes widened. "A fancy job with your own office and everything?" "Maybe. I don't know all the details yet." He twirled spaghetti around his fork, buying time to organize his thoughts. "It would be more money than I make now. We could maybe get a better apartment in a neighborhood with a park nearby." "Could I have my own room with dolphin wallpaper?" Jack smiled despite his inner turmoil. "Possibly, but it's a big decision. I'd be leaving the warehouse, working in a corporate environment. It's very different from what I'm used to." Lily considered this seriously, her small face scrunched in concentration. "Would you be happier? You always look tired when you come home from the warehouse." The question caught Jack off guard. Had he been that transparent? He'd tried so hard to shield Lily from his exhaustion, his constant worry about money, his fear of failing her. "I don't know, sunshine. It might be stressful in different ways." "But Ms. Eleanor would be there," Lily pointed out. "And she's nice. She gave me Echo in my ocean book." Jack nodded, acknowledging the simple truth in his daughter's observation. Eleanor Blackwell had shown them nothing but kindness and generosity. The job offer might be unexpected, even overwhelming, but it didn't feel manipulative or calculating. It felt like a genuine opportunity, one that Rachel would have urged him to consider. Later that night, after Lily was asleep, Jack sat at their small kitchen table with a cup of coffee and the Black Star Technologies employee handbook that Eleanor had emailed him. Its pristine digital pages outlined benefits, policies, and opportunities that seemed almost fantastical compared to his current employment. The sensible thing would be to accept the offer immediately to secure this chance at a better life for Lily. Yet something held him back, not just pride this time, but a deeper uncertainty about stepping into a world so different from his own. Would he fit in among educated professionals with advanced degrees and corporate pedigrees? Would his practical experience translate to an environment where decisions were made in boardrooms rather than on loading docks? And then there was Eleanor herself. Jack couldn't deny the connection between them, the strange, almost mystical thread that had begun with Rachel and continued through their chance encounter on the sidewalk. But what did that connection mean? Was it merely the universe's way of balancing accounts? Or was it the beginning of something neither of them had anticipated? His coffee had gone cold by the time he reached for his phone and composed a text message. "I'd like to discuss the job offer in person. When would be convenient?" Eleanor's response came almost immediately, as if she'd been waiting. "Tomorrow my home, rather than the office. Less formal, more privacy to talk. I can send a car for you and Lily at 10 a.m. if that works." Jack hesitated only briefly before replying, "We'll be ready at 10. As he prepared for bed, he found himself thinking about the watch inscription again. It's never too late to begin again. Rachel had believed it. She'd shared that belief with Eleanor during her crisis. And now perhaps it was Jack's turn to embrace the possibility of beginning again, of building a life that offered more than mere survival for himself and his daughter. The irony wasn't lost on him. Eleanor Blackwell had nearly died on that sidewalk. In saving her life, Jack may have inadvertently saved his own as well, not from physical death, but from the slow suffocation of potential that came from a life constrained by necessity rather than choice. Tomorrow would bring decisions that could alter their future irrevocably. But tonight, in the quiet of their small apartment, Jack allowed himself to do something he hadn't done since Rachel's death. He allowed himself to hope. The car that arrived at precisely 10 a.m. the next morning wasn't the sleek black SUV Jack had expected, but a more modest sedan with a friendly, middle-aged driver who introduced himself simply as Frank. Lily, dressed in her favorite Dolphin t-shirt and carrying Echo under one arm, was initially disappointed by the car's ordinary appearance, but quickly won over by Frank's grandfatherly manner and willingness to answer her endless questions about driving for Ms. Elena. "How big is her house?" Lily asked as they left the familiar grid of their working-class neighborhood for the tree-lined avenues of the city's more affluent districts. "Does she have a swimming pool with dolphins?" Frank chuckled, meeting Jack's eyes briefly in the rearview mirror. "Blackwell's home is comfortable but not extravagant," he explained diplomatically. "She prefers to live simply in many ways." Jack appreciated the man's tact. He'd been bracing himself for some ostentatious mansion that would only reinforce the vast differences between his world and Eleanor's. The idea that she might live with relative modesty despite her wealth intrigued him. When they turned into a private drive about 20 minutes later, Jack's first impression was one of understated elegance rather than flashy opulence. The house, while certainly substantial, was a tasteful contemporary structure of natural stone and glass that seemed to blend harmoniously with the wooded lot surrounding it. "It looks like a forest house," Lily whispered as they approached the front entrance. "Like in my storybooks." Eleanor was waiting for them at the door, dressed casually in linen pants, in a simple blouse, her feet bare, in a way that immediately humanized her. "Welcome," she said warmly, stepping aside to let them enter. "I'm so glad you could come." The home's interior continued the theme of natural simplicity, open spaces filled with light, comfortable furnishings in neutral tones, and walls adorned with what appeared to be original artwork, depicting ocean scenes and marine life. "You have dolphins," Lily exclaimed, spotting a large painting of bottlenose dolphins swimming through turquoise waters. Eleanor smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "I do. I've always loved them. When I was about your age, my father took me to see them in Florida. I never forgot how graceful they were." She led them through to a sun-filled kitchen overlooking a terrace garden. "I thought we might have brunch on the patio if that suits you. It's such a beautiful day." Jack nodded, trying to absorb the surreal quality of the moment, standing in Eleanor Blackwell's kitchen, discussing brunch plans as if this were a normal Saturday activity rather than a potentially life-changing meeting. The patio was comfortably furnished with cushioned wicker chairs arranged around a circular table already set for three. Beyond it, the garden descended in gentle tiers to a small, natural-looking pond, where water lilies floated on the surface. "Can I look at the pond?" Lily asked, her natural reserve overwhelmed by curiosity. "Of course," Eleanor replied. "There are fish in there, Coy. They might come up to say hello if you're very still." As Lily carefully made her way down the garden steps, Eleanor turned to Jack. "She's remarkable," she said softly. "So resilient, so open to wonder despite everything she's been through." "Children adapt," Jack said, watching his daughter kneel by the pond's edge, echo the dolphin still clutched in one arm. "Sometimes better than adults." "Indeed," Eleanor gestured toward the table. "Shall we sit? The food should be ready shortly." The promised brunch turned out to be a relaxed affair of fresh fruit pastries and a frittata that Eleanor admitted had been prepared by her part-time housekeeper rather than herself. "I'm afraid cooking has never been my strong suit," she confessed with a self-deprecating smile. "Too many years of takeout at the office." Lily, rejoining them with excited reports of the orange and white spotted fish, had no such reservations about the food, happily devouring a blueberry muffin while peppering Eleanor with questions about her house, her work, and whether she'd ever ridden on a dolphin. Eleanor's admission that such activities were harmful to dolphins earned her a serious nod of approval from Lily. It was only after they'd finished eating, and Lily had been settled with her marine biology book and a promise to explore the garden further, that the conversation turned to the job offer. "I've brought the formal offer letter," Eleanor said, producing a folder from beside her chair. "All the details are there: salary, benefits, job description. But I suspect you have questions beyond what's on paper." Jack accepted the folder but didn't open it immediately. "Just one main question," he said, meeting her eyes directly. "Why me? With all the qualified candidates you must have access to, why offer this position to someone you barely know?" Eleanor considered him thoughtfully, her fingers absently tracing the edge of her water glass. "Do you know what I look for in employees, Jack, beyond qualifications and experience?" He shook his head. "Character," she said simply. "Integrity. The willingness to do what's right even when it's difficult or inconvenient. Those qualities can't be taught in any business school or technical program." She gestured toward Lily, now crouched by a flower bed, examining something with intense concentration. "You've raised an extraordinary child while working a physically demanding job and grieving the loss of your wife. You've maintained your dignity and self-sufficiency under circumstances that would break many people. And when faced with a stranger in crisis, you acted without hesitation, knowing there would be no reward." Jack shifted uncomfortably under her direct assessment. "That doesn't necessarily translate to corporate skills." "Doesn't it?" Eleanor leaned forward slightly. "Black Star Technologies employs over 3,000 people at our main campus alone. The facilities coordinator oversees systems that affect every one of those employees' daily working conditions. It requires someone who can think systematically, prioritize effectively, and solve problems creatively. All skills you demonstrated in your Navy career and continue to use daily, albeit in different contexts." She paused, allowing her words to sink in. "But more importantly, it requires someone who understands that buildings aren't just structures. They're environment mates where people spend the majority of their waking hours. The right person in this role can significantly impact employee well-being and productivity." Jack finally opened the folder, scanning the offer letter with its detailed outline of responsibilities, reporting structure, and compensation. The salary figure, $85,000 annually, still seemed almost unreal, a misplaced decimal point in the story of his life. "This is very generous," he acknowledged quietly. "It's market rate for the position," Eleanor corrected him. "Maybe slightly above, but not excessively. I don't believe in underpaying valuable employees any more than I believe in charity disguised as employment." Jack continued reading, noting the comprehensive health insurance that would cover Lily's medical needs without the anxiety-inducing deductibles and copays of his current plan. The retirement contribution, the paid time off, the flexible scheduling options for parents, each benefit represented freedom from a specific worry that had shadowed him since Rachel's death. "What happens if it doesn't work out?" he asked, voicing his deepest fear. "If I'm not what you expected, or if the role isn't what I thought it would be?" "Then we address it honestly," Eleanor replied, "like adults who respect each other. I'm not offering you this position as a favor, Jack. I'm offering it because I believe you can excel in it. But if I'm wrong or if you're unhappy, we'll find a solution that works for everyone." Jack closed the folder, his decision made, though he wasn't quite ready to voice it. There's something else I need to ask, he said, his tone shifting. Something not related to the job. Eleanor nodded, waiting. The watch inscription, Rachel's words. You said a nurse gave it to you during a difficult time. But was it really just a random act of kindness, or was there more to it? A shadow crossed Eleanor's face, a flicker of old pain quickly controlled. You're very perceptive, she said after a moment. No, it wasn't random. Your wife intervened during what I later recognized as a suicide attempt. Jack felt as if the ground had shifted beneath him. What? Eleanor's gaze drifted to the garden where Lily was now carefully examining a butterfly that had landed near her. 3 years ago, my life imploded rather spectacularly. My husband of 20 years left me for a woman half my age, a relationship that had apparently been going on for some time. Simultaneously, Black Star's newest product line failed catastrophically due to what I later discovered was corporate sabotage. The board was questioning my leadership, the press was having a field day with my personal life, and I felt emptied out, like everything I'd built was worthless. She drew a careful breath, and Jack could see how difficult this admission was for someone accustomed to projecting strength and control. I checked into Mercy General under a pseudonym, ostensibly for exhaustion. The truth was, I'd taken enough prescription medication to ensure I wouldn't wake up. But Rachel found you, Jack said softly, understanding now why the connection between them felt so profound. Eleanor nodded, her composure momentarily fractured by the memory. She recognized what was happening immediately. Got my stomach pumped, stayed with me through that horrible night, and then, this was the extraordinary part, she didn't report it as a suicide attempt. She protected my privacy, my reputation, when she had every reason to follow protocol. That sounds like Rachel, Jack said, his throat tight with emotion. She always saw the person beyond the patient. The next day, she brought me the watch. Said she'd noticed mine was broken, which was true. I'd smashed it during a particularly dark moment, and that I shouldn't leave without a way to measure the new time I'd been given. Eleanor's fingers went to her bare wrist, as if feeling the phantom weight of the timepiece. The inscription was what broke through to me. It's never too late to begin again. Such a simple phrase, but exactly what I needed to hear at that moment. Jack nodded, remembering how those same words had sustained him and Rachel through her illness. She believed that deeply. Even at the end, when the treatments had failed and we knew she was dying, she'd remind me of it. Said it would be my job to begin again for both of us, to show Lily that life goes on even after profound loss. They sat in silence for a moment, connected by shared understanding of Rachel's impact on both their lives. It was Lily who broke the spell, returning to the table with a flushed face and bright eyes. Daddy, Ms. Eleanor, I found a special rock in the garden. Look, it has sparkles inside. Jack examined the ordinary quartz specimen with appropriate admiration, while Eleanor promised to help Lily look for more special rocks after they had finished their conversation. Perhaps you'd like to see the rest of the house, Eleanor suggested once Lily had returned to her exploration. It might help you visualize your life beyond just the job offer. The tour revealed a home that, while certainly luxurious by Jack's standards, lacked the ostentatious display of wealth he'd half expected. The spaces were thoughtfully designed but lived in, with books piled on side tables and a casual sweater draped over a chair in the study. It was the home of someone with means, but not the need to constantly demonstrate those means to others. You mentioned flexible scheduling for parents, Jack said as they passed a room that appeared to be a home office. How would that work? Practically, Lily's school lets out at 3:15, and the after-school program only runs until 5:30. The standard workday at Black Star is 800 to 5, but the facilities coordinator role has some flexibility, Eleanor explained. Many start at 700 and finish by 3:30. We also have an on-site childcare facility for days when schools close, but Black Star is open. Several employees' children attend Lily's school, in fact, and have formed a carpool. Jack tried to imagine it, dropping Lily at school in the morning, working in a professional environment where his skills were valued, picking her up in the afternoon with enough daylight left for them to enjoy time together. No more exhausted evenings when he was too drained from physical labor to do more than microwave dinner and help with homework. No more weekends spent working overtime just to cover basic expenses. I'd need to give notice at the warehouse, he said, the decision crystallizing as he spoke. 2 weeks at least. They've been good to me considering. Eleanor smiled, recognizing his acceptance without requiring him to state it explicitly. Of course, we can set your start date accordingly. And Jack, this is a new beginning for Black Star as well. We need fresh perspectives, people who see beyond corporate hierarchies to what really matters. As they rejoined Lily in the garden, Jack felt a strange lightness, as if a burden he'd carried for so long had shifted, not disappearing entirely but becoming more manageable. The future still held uncertainties, but for the first time since Rachel's death, those uncertainties carried possibilities rather than just threats. Lily, who had collected an impressive array of special rocks, most of them ordinary garden pebbles, looked up at her father with uncanny perception. "You took the job, didn't you?" she asked. "I can tell by your face. You look happy." Jack exchanged a glance with Eleanor, surprised by his daughter's intuition. "Yes, sunshine, I did. We're going to be making some changes, but good ones. How would you feel about a new apartment, maybe in this neighborhood? You could have your own room with dolphin wallpaper." Lily considered this seriously. "Would we still see Mrs. Rodriguez?" "We'd visit her," Jack promised, touched by his daughter's concern for their elderly neighbor. "And maybe she could visit us sometimes too." This assurance earned a solemn nod of approval from Lily. "Then I think it's a good change. Mom always said change helps you grow, like how plants need different seasons." Eleanor, who had been observing this exchange with quiet appreciation, knelt beside Lily to examine her rock collection. "These are wonderful finds," she said, treating Lily's treasures with the seriousness they deserved. "You have a good eye for special things that other people might miss." "That's what Mom used to say," Lily replied, carefully rearranging her rocks in order of perceived specialness. "She said I notice magic in ordinary places." "A valuable skill," Eleanor agreed. "One that many adults forget." She glanced up at Jack, something vulnerable in her expression. "Would you both like to stay for dinner?" "Nothing fancy, just something simple we could prepare together. I have an excellent recipe for homemade pizza that children can help with." The invitation hung in the air between them, not just an offer of a meal, but a tentative step towards something more personal than a professional relationship. Jack found himself nodding before he'd fully processed the implications. "We'd like that," he said. "Wouldn't we, Lily?" "Can I put dolphin shapes on my pizza?" Lily asked, already warming to the idea. Eleanor laughed, the sound surprisingly youthful and unguarded. "We can certainly try. I have cookie cutters we could use for the toppings." As they headed back into the house, Lily chattering excitedly about pizza possibilities, Jack felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time. The simple pleasure of shared company without the underlying current of worry that had become his constant companion. For a few hours at least, he could step out of his role as the struggling single father and simply be Jack, a man enjoying a Saturday with his daughter and a new friend who somehow, against all odds, connected them to the wife and mother they'd lost. The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of preparations. Jack gave notice at the warehouse, where his announcement was met with mixed reactions. Genuine congratulations from Walter and a few close colleagues, thinly veiled envy from others, and grudging acceptance from his supervisor, who admitted that Jack had long been overqualified for warehouse work. "Just don't forget us little people when you're up in your fancy office," Walter told him on his last day, the gruff humor barely concealing genuine emotion. "Some of us might need a good word put in someday." "I could never forget you, Walter," Jack promised, touched by the older man's concern. "In fact, I was hoping you might consider a change yourself. Black Star has an opening for a security consultant, someone with military experience to review their protocols. The hours are flexible, perfect for someone semi-retired." Walter's bushy eyebrows shot up in surprise. "You're offering me a job at your fancy new company?" "Just passing along information," Jack clarified. "The decision would be yours. But they need someone with real-world experience, not just theoretical knowledge. And you're the most observant person I know." He handed Walter a business card with Richard Davenport's contact information. "Think about it. That's all I'm asking." Meanwhile, Eleanor had helped Jack secure a 2-bedroom apartment in a safe neighborhood not far from her home, close enough to Lily's school that she could continue attending without disruption, yet far enough from their old neighborhood to feel like a genuine fresh start. The rent was reasonable despite the upscale location, though Jack suspected Eleanor might have quietly arranged a special rate with the building's owner, who happened to be a Black Star Technologies investor. The apartment was a revelation compared to their previous home, spacious with large windows that flooded the rooms with natural light, new appliances in the kitchen, and most miraculous of all, a small balcony where Jack could imagine setting up container gardens in the spring. Lily's bedroom was large enough for the dolphin-themed decor she'd been dreaming of, and Jack's room featured a walk-in closet that seemed almost absurdly luxurious after years of making do with a small dresser and a few hooks on the wall. "It's perfect," he told Eleanor when she came to see the apartment after they'd moved in. "Honestly, it's more than I ever imagined we'd have." "It's exactly what you deserve," she replied simply. "Both of you." Their relationship had evolved during those 2 weeks, shifting from the formal politeness of their early encounters to something warmer and more comfortable. Eleanor had become a regular presence in their lives, joining them for occasional dinners, bringing books for Lily, and offering practical advice about navigating the transition to their new neighborhood. Jack found himself looking forward to her visits, appreciating her dry humor and insightful observations. There was a genuineness to her that contrasted sharply with the polished corporate image she presented to the world. A private Eleanor, who laughed at Lily's jokes, who admitted to a secret fondness for science fiction novels, who sometimes spoke with passionate intensity about projects that could improve people's lives rather than just Blackstar's bottom line. The day before Jack was to start his new position, Eleanor invited them to dinner at her home, a celebration of new beginnings, she called it. The evening was relaxed and joyful, with Lily proudly presenting Eleanor with a hand-drawn card declaring her an honorary Anne, and Jack finding himself more at ease in Eleanor's elegant home than he would have thought possible a month earlier. After Lily had fallen asleep on Eleanor's couch, exhausted from excitement and a vigorous game of hide-and-seek in the garden, Jack found himself alone with Eleanor on the patio, the evening air still warm enough to be pleasant. "Nervous about tomorrow?" she asked, sipping a glass of red wine as they watched the stars emerge above the garden. "A little," Jack admitted. "It's been a long time since I've worked in anything resembling an office environment. The Navy wasn't exactly corporate America." Eleanor smiled. "You might be surprised by the similarities. Chain of command, clear protocols, technical jargon that sounds like a foreign language to outsiders. Still, I don't want to embarrass you. You've put your reputation on the line by hiring me." "Jack," Eleanor's voice carried a gentle reproof, "I didn't hire you as a personal favor. I hired you because you're the right person for the job. The fact that I've come to care about you and Lily is separate from that professional assessment." The simple statement, "I've come to care about you," hung in the air between them, its implications both promising and complicated. Jack wasn't naive. He recognized the growing connection between them, the easy comfort they'd developed in each other's company. But he also knew that relationships built during times of transition were inherently fragile, shaped by circumstances that might not reflect reality once the initial intensity faded. "I should probably get Lily home," he said finally, not quite ready to address the unspoken current between them. "Big day tomorrow for both of us." Eleanor nodded, accepting his deflection without comment. "Of course. Frank can drive you, or I can call a taxi if you prefer." "Frank's fine if he's available, thank you." As Jack gathered the still sleeping Lily in his arms, Eleanor touched his shoulder lightly. "For what it's worth, I think Rachel would be proud of you. Of the father you've become, the man you are." The words caught him off guard, striking deeper than she could have known. "I hope so," he said quietly. "I try to make decisions she would approve of. From everything you have told me about her, I think she'd want you to make decisions that lead to happiness for both you and Lily. Not just survival, but genuine joy." Jack nodded, unable to respond around the sudden tightness in his throat. Eleanor seemed to understand, stepping back to give him space with the emotional moment. "I'll see you tomorrow," she said simply. "Not as your boss, but as your colleague. Remember that, Jack. At Blackstar, we're all part of the same team." Jack's first day at Blackstar Technologies began at 7:00 a.m. with an orientation session conducted by Richard Davenport himself, an honor usually reserved for executive-level hires, though Jack didn't realize this until later. "We're delighted to have you with us," Davenport said, shaking Jack's hand warmly as they stood in the sleek lobby of Blackstar's main building. "Eleanor speaks very highly of your capabilities." The morning was a whirlwind of introductions, paperwork, and technological setups. Jack received his employee badge access codes for various systems and a company laptop that made his old home computer look like an archaeological artifact. His office, an actual office with a door and windows, not a cubicle or shared workspace, was modest but well appointed with a desk, comfortable chair, and small conference table for meetings. Most of your job will be out in the buildings, not behind this desk, explained Janet Walsh, the outgoing facilities coordinator, who was staying on for 2 weeks to train Jack before her retirement. But it's nice to have a quiet place to do paperwork and take calls. Janet was a no-nonsense woman in her early 60s who had managed Blackstar's facilities for over 15 years. Jack had been concerned that she might resent him, an outsider with no corporate experience, taking over her carefully maintained domain, but she seemed genuinely pleased by his practical questions and obvious respect for her expertise. Your predecessor left excellent documentation, she told him, indicating several meticulously organized binders on a shelf. But the real learning happens when systems break down and you have to think on your feet. As if summoned by her words, Jack's newly issued radio crackled. With an urgent message, the main elevator in the East Tower was stuck between floors with 6 people inside, including 2 members of the board of directors. Baptism by fire, Janet said with a knowing smile. Think you're up for it? Jack felt the familiar calm that descended whenever he faced a practical problem that needed solving. This was what he understood: mechanical systems, logical troubleshooting, finding solutions under pressure. Let's go take a look, he said, already heading for the door. Within 30 minutes, Jack had diagnosed the problem as a sensor malfunction, coordinated with the elevator maintenance company, and personally reassured the trapped passengers through the emergency communication system. His calm, professional demeanor and clear explanations had prevented panic and demonstrated exactly the kind of practical leadership Eleanor had seen in him during their first encounter. Impressive, said a tall, distinguished-looking man who introduced himself as Henry Mitchell, one of Blackstar's board members and one of the recently freed elevator passengers. Most people would have panicked or immediately called for outside help. Sometimes the simplest solution is the right one, Jack replied, unconsciously echoing something Rachel used to say about approaching problems with common sense rather than complexity. Mitchell studied him with calculating eyes that reminded Jack of certain officers he'd encountered in the Navy, men who measured others solely by their usefulness. You're Eleanor's new hire, aren't you? The one with the unusual background. The slight pause spoke volumes, and Jack felt a familiar tension creep into his shoulders. I'm the new facilities coordinator, yes, Jack Reynolds. Fascinating, Mitchell said in a tone that suggested the opposite. Well, I'll be sure to tell the board about your heroics today. We're always interested in Eleanor's more unconventional decisions. Before Jack could respond, Janet Walsh intervened smoothly. Mr. Mitchell, I believe your assistant was looking for you. Something about the quarterly projections meeting. Mitchell nodded curtly and departed without further comment, leaving Jack with the distinct impression that he'd just encountered his first potential adversary in the corporate landscape. Don't mind him, Janet advised once Mitchell was out of earshot. He's been trying to undermine Eleanor for years. Takes every opportunity to question her judgment, especially since her health scare. Why does the board keep him on if he's so disruptive? Janet's expression turned grim. Money and connections. His family's been involved with Blackstar since the beginning, and he controls a significant portion of voting shares. She patted Jack's arm sympathetically. Just do your job well, and most of the board will recognize your value regardless of how you got here. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings, facility tours, and introductions to key personnel. By the time Jack left to pick up Lily from school, he felt simultaneously exhilarated and exhausted, his mind racing with new information while his body adjusted to a different kind of fatigue than the physical exhaustion of warehouse work. Lily was waiting at the school gate, her face lighting up when she spotted him approaching. Daddy, how was your first day? Did you fix important things? Did you see Ms. Eleanor? Jack laughed, swinging her up for a hug, despite her growing protest that she was too big for such displays. Yes to all 3 questions. It was interesting and challenging. I fixed an elevator with important people stuck inside, and I saw Ms. Eleanor briefly during a meeting. Did she look pretty? The innocent question caught Jack off guard. She looked professional. He hedged, though in truth, he'd been struck by how Eleanor had seamlessly transitioned from the casual warmth of their private interactions to the polished authority she projected in the corporate setting without losing the essential kindness that defined her. Lily gave him the skeptical look that was pure Rachel. "That's not an answer, Daddy." "Yes," he admitted finally. She looked pretty and smart and very much in charge. This seemed to satisfy Lily, who launched into an excited account of her own day, particularly her science class, where they were studying marine ecosystems, a topic that had become her passionate interest since receiving Eleanor's book. That evening, as they settled into their new apartment, still somewhat strange, with its unfamiliar sounds and spaces, Jack found himself reflecting on the extraordinary chain of events that had brought them to this moment. Just over a month ago, he'd been a warehouse worker living paycheck to paycheck, his horizons limited by financial necessity and the daily struggle to provide for his daughter. Now he had a professional position with a future, a comfortable home in a safe neighborhood, and perhaps most surprisingly, a growing friendship with a woman who connected him to Rachel in ways he was still trying to understand. "Do you think Mom can see us from heaven?" Lily asked suddenly as Jack tucked her into bed, her new dolphin-themed comforter pulled up to her chin. "I believe she can," Jack said carefully, sitting on the edge of the bed. They'd had variations of this conversation many times since Rachel's death, but it felt different somehow in this new space. "Do you think she's happy that we're making new friends, like Miss Eleanor?" Jack stroked Lily's hair gently, considering his answer. "I think your mom would be very happy that we're building a good life, sunshine. She always wanted that for us, even when she knew she couldn't be part of it." Lily nodded, her expression solemn in the soft glow of her nightlight. "I think she sent Ms. Eleanor to us, like a guardian angel except real." The simple statement, delivered with childlike certainty, struck Jack deeply. From the adult perspective, the connection between Rachel, Eleanor, and themselves was a series of improbable coincidences. But through Lily's eyes, it was something more purposeful, a continuing expression of Rachel's love reaching across the boundary of death itself. "Maybe she did," Jack conceded, not wanting to diminish his daughter's perspective. "Your mom was pretty amazing at taking care of the people she loved." As the weeks passed, Jack settled into his new role at Blackstar with growing confidence. The practical skills he'd developed in the Navy translated well to the complex systems of a corporate campus, and his straightforward communication style earned the respect of the maintenance staff, who appreciated a manager who understood their challenges firsthand. Eleanor maintained a careful professional distance at work, treating Jack with the same respectful collegiality she showed all her senior staff. But their personal connection continued to deepen during evening dinners and weekend outings, with Lily casual, comfortable interactions that gradually built a foundation of genuine friendship and mutual understanding. It was during one such dinner at Eleanor's home, about 2 months after Jack had started at Blackstar, that the subtle shift in their relationship became impossible to ignore. Lily had fallen asleep on the couch after an energetic game of charades, leaving Jack and Eleanor alone in the kitchen, washing dishes side by side in a domestic rhythm that felt surprisingly natural. "You're different here," Jack observed, passing Eleanor a rinsed plate to dry. "At work, I mean. Not in a bad way, just different." Eleanor smiled, accepting the plate. "We all wear masks in professional settings. Some are just more noticeable than others." "I suppose," Jack agreed, though he suspected his own professional mask was considerably less developed than hers. "Does it ever get exhausting, maintaining the CEO persona?" "Sometimes," Eleanor admitted, her voice softening, "especially since the heart attack. It's made me question a lot of things about how I've structured my life." Jack handed her another plate, their fingers brushing briefly in the exchange. "Like what?" Eleanor was silent for a moment, methodically drying the dish before setting it in the cabinet. "Like whether success means what I've always thought it did. Whether independence is really strength or just another kind of isolation." The vulnerability in her admission touched something in Jack, a recognition of the essential loneliness that had shadowed his own life since Rachel's death, despite Lily's constant loving presence. "Rachel used to say that being strong doesn't mean doing everything alone," he said quietly. "It means knowing when to lean on others and when to be the one providing support." Eleanor turned to face him fully, the kitchen towel still in her hands. "Your wife was a very wise woman." "She was," Jack agreed, his throat tightening with the familiar ache of loss that never quite disappeared, though it had softened over time. "I think you would have liked each other." "I know we would have." Eleanor's eyes held his, a depth of emotion in them that transcended simple compassion or attraction. In some ways, I feel like I do know her through you and Lily, through the way she shaped both of you. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken possibilities. Jack was acutely aware of Eleanor's proximity, of the subtle floral scent of her perfume, of the way the kitchen's soft lighting caught the silver strands in her dark hair. More than physical attraction, though that was certainly present, he felt a profound connection, as if they had known each other far longer than the few months of their actual acquaintance. For either could bridge the gap between friendship and something more, Lily's sleepy voice called from the living room. "Daddy, is it time to go home?" The spell broken. Jack stepped back, both relieved and disappointed by the interruption. "Coming sunshine," he called, then turned back to Eleanor with an apologetic smile. "I should get her home to bed." Eleanor nodded, her composure quickly restored, though her eyes still held the warmth of their shared moment. "Of course, it's getting late." As they gathered Lily's things and prepared to leave, Jack found himself wondering what might have happened if they'd had a few more minutes alone. Would he have found the courage to acknowledge the growing feelings between them? Would she have welcomed that acknowledgement or gently redirected their relationship back to safer territory? "Jack," owner said, as they reached the door, Lily already half asleep against his shoulder. "There's a company event next Friday, a fundraising gala for our educational foundation. Would you and Lily like to attend as my guests, not as an employee obligation?" The invitation hung between them, not quite a date, but definitely more than a casual social encounter. Jack found himself nodding before he'd fully processed the implications. "We'd like that," he said. "Wouldn't we, Lily?" "Mm-hmm," Lily murmured, sleepily. "Will there be cake?" Eleanor laughed, the tension of the earlier moment dissolving into genuine amusement. "Yes, I believe there will definitely be cake." The week leading up to the gala was unusually hectic at Black Star. A routine security audit had revealed potential vulnerabilities in several of their systems, requiring Jack to coordinate with IT security on a comprehensive review of physical access points throughout the campus. "We've identified some concerning patterns," explained Lisa Chen, Blackstar's head of cybersecurity, during a briefing with Jack and several other department heads. "There have been multiple attempts to access our development servers from within the building using credentials that shouldn't have that level of clearance." "An inside job?" Richard Davenport asked, his usually calm demeanor visibly disturbed by the implications. Lisa nodded grimly. "That's our working theory. Someone with physical access to the building is trying to steal proprietary information, possibly about the new neural interface project." Jack listened carefully, mentally cataloging the various access points that would need to be reviewed. The neural interface was Eleanor's pet project, a revolutionary technology that promised to help patients with severe paralysis regain mobility through thought-controlled prosthetics. A breakthrough in the field that could transform millions of lives while simultaneously cementing Blackstar's position as an industry leader. "We'll need to review all badge access logs," he said, already thinking through the logistics. "Cross-reference them with actual physical presence using security camera footage. It's going to be labor-intensive." "I'll assign additional security personnel to assist," Richard offered. "This takes priority over everything except critical operations." As the meeting concluded, Henry Mitchell appeared in the doorway, his timing so perfect it seemed almost calculated. "Security issues?" he inquired, his tone deceptively casual. "Anything the board should be concerned about?" Richard exchanged a quick glance with Jack before responding carefully. "Just a routine audit, Henry, nothing that rises to board level at this point." Mitchell's gaze lingered on Jack, a calculating assessment that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. "Interesting that these concerns arise shortly after we've introduced new personnel to sensitive areas." The implication was clear, and Jack felt a surge of anger that he carefully controlled. "If you're suggesting I have something to do with this, Mr. Mitchell, I'd appreciate you stating it directly rather than insinuating." "I'm not suggesting anything," Mitchell replied smoothly, "merely observing a correlation. As a board member, it's my responsibility to consider all possibilities, however uncomfortable they might be." Richard stepped forward, his posture subtly protective. "Jack has been an exemplary addition to our team, Henry. His security clearance was thoroughly vetted before he was hired." Of course, of course." Mitchell backpedaled slightly, though his eyes remained cold. "I meant no offense. I'm sure Ms. Blackwell's personal interest in Mr. Reynolds' welfare wouldn't cloud her professional judgment. Before Jack could respond to this more direct provocation, Lisa Chen intervened. If you'll excuse us, Mr. Mitchell, we have a significant amount of work to complete. Unless the board has officially tasked you with overseeing security protocols, Mitchell's smile didn't reach his eyes. Not at all, Ms. Chen. I'll leave you to your investigation. He nodded curtly and departed, leaving an uncomfortable silence in his wake. Don't let him get to you, Richard advised Jack quietly. He's been trying to undermine Eleanor's leadership for years. This is just his latest angle of attack. Jack nodded, though Mitchell's insinuations had struck a nerve. His relationship with Eleanor had remained strictly professional at work, but he wasn't naive enough to think their growing personal connection had gone unnoticed. The last thing he wanted was to become a liability to her position or reputation. Over the next few days, Jack threw himself into the security review, with single-minded focus determined to identify the source of the breach and prove his value beyond any personal connection to Eleanor. He worked late into the evenings, grateful that Mrs. Rodriguez had agreed to watch Lily occasionally, despite the distance to their new apartment. By Friday morning, their efforts had yielded results. The unauthorized access attempts had been traced to a terminal in the Research and Development Department, used primarily by a team working under Mitchell's direct oversight. The evidence wasn't conclusive, but it was suggestive enough to warrant further investigation. I'll brief Eleanor, Richard said, after reviewing their findings. This has board-level implications now, especially given Mitchell's involvement, however tangential it might be. Jack nodded, relieved that the responsibility for confronting Mitchell wouldn't fall to him directly. Let me know if you need anything else from facilities. We're implementing the additional security measures as discussed. As he left Richard's office, Jack checked his watch. 4:30 p.m. Barely enough time to pick up Lily, help her get ready for the gala, and prepare himself as well. The event suddenly seemed frivolous compared to the security concerns they were addressing, but he knew its importance for Black Star's educational initiatives and, if he was honest with himself, for his evolving relationship with Eleanor. The gala was being held at the city's Natural History Museum, its grand marble halls transformed for the evening, with elegant lighting and displays highlighting Black Star's technological contributions to education. Jack felt somewhat out of place in his rented tuxedo, conscious of the subtle differences between his attire and the bespoke suits worn by most male attendees. Lily, however, was in her element, resplendent in a new dress that Eleanor had helped select, a modest but beautifully made creation in ocean blue that perfectly complemented her dark hair and eyes. She moved through the crowded reception area with the natural confidence of childhood, fascinated by the museum exhibits, still visible behind the evening's decorations. "Daddy, look, they have a whale skeleton," she exclaimed, pointing to the massive display suspended from the ceiling in the main hall. "It's even bigger than the one in my book." Jack smiled, grateful for his daughter's uncomplicated excitement. "It's incredible, isn't it? That's a blue whale, the largest animal that's ever lived on Earth." "Larger than dinosaurs," came Eleanor's voice from behind them, warm with amusement and genuine interest in Lily's response. They turned to find her approaching, stunning, in a simple black evening gown that managed to be both elegant and understated. Her hair was swept up in a classic style that emphasized the graceful line of her neck, and she wore the watch, the one with Rachel's words engraved on the back, as her only significant jewelry. "Ms. Eleanor," Lily exclaimed, momentarily forgetting the etiquette they'd practiced for the event. "You look like a princess," Eleanor laughed, bending slightly to accept Lily's enthusiastic hug. "And you look absolutely beautiful, Lily. That color is perfect on you." Jack found himself momentarily speechless, struck by the genuine warmth between Eleanor and his daughter, and, if he was honest, by how truly lovely Eleanor looked outside her usual corporate attire. "You both clean up pretty well," he managed, finally earning a smile from Eleanor that seemed to carry private meaning beyond the casual compliment. "As do you," she returned, her eyes taking in his formal attire with obvious appreciation. "The event is just getting started, but I wanted to find you before I get pulled into official hosting duties. There are some people I'd like you to meet if you're comfortable with that." The people turned out to include the city's mayor, several prominent educational leaders, and the dean of the state university's engineering school, all of whom treated Jack with genuine interest and respect when Eleanor introduced him as one of Black Star's most valuable recent additions. Lily, initially shy among so many unfamiliar adults, blossomed under the attention of a retired marine biologist who was delighted by her knowledge of dolphins and ocean conservation. When the formal dinner portion of the evening began, Jack found himself seated at Eleanor's table alongside Richard Davenport and several other senior executives, while Lily was placed beside the marine biologist, their animated conversation continuing throughout the meal. "She's remarkable," Richard commented to Jack, nodding toward Lily, who was listening intently to something the scientist was explaining. "Absolutely fearless in her curiosity. Reminds me of Eleanor when she was younger." Jack followed his gaze, pride swelling in his chest. "Rachel was like that too, always asking questions, always wanting to understand how things worked. Lily gets it from both of us, I think." The evening progressed smoothly until the dessert course when Jack noticed Henry Mitchell approaching their table, his expression pleasant, but his eyes calculating as they fixed on Eleanor. "Eleanor, my dear, a wonderful event, as always," Mitchell said, his voice carrying just the right note of public admiration. "Black Star's commitment to education is truly inspiring." "Thank you, Henry," Eleanor replied, her professional mask firmly in place despite the subtle tension Jack could detect in her posture. "The Foundation's work is particularly important to me." Mitchell turned his attention to Jack, his smile never wavering. "And Mr. Reynolds, how nice to see you in this setting. I understand you've been quite involved in our recent security review. Finding it illuminating, are you?" The deliberate emphasis sent a chill down Jack's spine. Mitchell knew they were closing in on the security breach, and he was making it clear that he was aware of their investigation. "It's been educational," Jack replied, carefully conscious of the public setting and Eleanor's questioning glance. "Black Star's systems are impressively complex." "Indeed they are," Mitchell agreed smoothly. "So many interconnected parts, so many potential vulnerabilities. One never knows where the weak point might be found." His gaze shifted meaningfully to Eleanor, then back to Jack. "Well, I won't keep you from your dessert. Enjoy the remainder of the evening." As Mitchell departed, Eleanor leaned closer to Jack, her voice low with concern. "What was that about? Has something happened with the security review?" Jack hesitated, not wanting to discuss sensitive matters at the gala, but recognizing Eleanor's right to know about potential threats to her company. "We've made some progress," he said quietly. "Richard was planning to brief you on Monday, but the short version is that we've traced the unauthorized access attempts to R&D, specifically to a terminal used by Mitchell's research team." Eleanor's expression remained composed, but Jack could see the sharp intelligence behind her eyes processing this information and its implications. "I see," she said finally. "That explains his sudden interest in our security protocols. We'll discuss this further after the event." The remainder of the evening passed without incident, though Jack noticed Eleanor was more reserved, her attention occasionally drifting despite her outward focus on her guests. When the formal program concluded and attendees began to depart, Jack found Lily curled up asleep in a chair, near the marine biologist who had thoughtfully covered her with his suit jacket. "She's had quite an evening," the elderly scientist told Jack as he carefully lifted his sleeping daughter. "Brilliant child. She asked questions I haven't considered in decades." Jack thanked him for his kindness, then sought out Eleanor to say goodnight. He found her in a quiet corner of the museum, speaking intently with Richard Davenport, their conversation ceasing abruptly when they noticed his approach. "Jack," Eleanor said, her expression softening at the sight of Lily asleep in his arms. "I was just about to look for you. Is she completely worn out?" "Intellectual stimulation apparently works better than bedtime stories," Jack confirmed with a smile. "We should probably head home, but I wanted to thank you for including us tonight. It was enlightening." The word choice was deliberate, echoing Mitchell's earlier insinuation, and Eleanor didn't miss the reference. "We were just discussing some of those illuminations," she said, exchanging a meaningful glance with Richard. "Would you be available for a meeting tomorrow morning at my home, not the office? Say 10 a.m. The request was unusual enough to raise Jack's concerns further. "Of course, should I bring Lily or—" "Actually," Richard interjected smoothly, "my wife was wondering if Lily might like to join our granddaughter at the Children's Science Museum tomorrow. Anna is about Lily's age, and they're featuring a special marine biology exhibit this month." The carefully orchestrated suggestion confirmed Jack's suspicion that whatever they needed to discuss was not suitable for Lily's ears. "That sounds great," he agreed, shifting Lily's weight in his arms. "She'd love that." "Excellent." Eleanor said, her professional composure firmly in place, despite the undercurrent of tension Jack could sense. Frank will pick you both up at 9:30. He can take Lily to meet Richard's family and then bring you to my home. As Jack made his way out of the museum, Lily a warm weight against his shoulder, he couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had shifted during the evening, that Mitchell's veiled threats and the discovery of the security breach's origin had accelerated a confrontation that had been building since Jack's arrival at Black Star. The next morning dawned clear and bright, a perfect late summer day that belied the tension Jack felt as he prepared for the mysterious meeting. Lily was excited about the Science Museum outing, chattering happily about marine exhibits and her new friend Anna as they waited for Frank to arrive. The drive to Eleanor's home after dropping Lily off was silent. Frank's usually friendly demeanor replaced by a professional reserve that only heightened Jack's apprehension. When they arrived, Jack was surprised to find not just Eleanor and Richard waiting in the study, but also Lisa Chen from cybersecurity and Walter Jenkins, his former colleague from the warehouse, now dressed in business casual attire that suggested he'd accepted the security consultant position Jack had mentioned. Walter Tom, Jack said, genuine pleasure momentarily displacing his concern. You took the job. The older man nodded, his weathered face serious despite the warmth in his eyes. Started last week. Turns out this old dog still has a few tricks to teach the corporate pups about real-world security. Eleanor gestured for Jack to take a seat, her expression grave. Thank you for coming, Jack. I apologize for the mystery, but what we need to discuss is sensitive enough that I felt it best to meet away from Black Star's campus. I assume this is about Mitchell and the security breach, Jack said, looking around at the assembled group. Richard nodded, taking the lead. Lisa's team has confirmed that the unauthorized access attempts originated from a terminal used primarily by Dr. Evan Foster, who leads Mitchell's research team on neural interface technology. The attempts specifically targeted our most advanced prototype designs and clinical trial data. Corporate espionage, Jack suggested, trying to understand the gravity of their expressions. Worse, Eleanor said quietly, we believe Mitchell is attempting to sabotage the neural interface project entirely. Walter discovered something concerning when reviewing our physical security footage. Walter leaned forward, his military bearing evident even in casual clothes. I've been monitoring all access points since I started paying particular attention to the R&D labs after hours. 3 nights ago, I observed Dr. Foster entering the main testing lab at 2:17 a.m. using Mitchell's security credentials. He spent approximately 42 minutes making adjustments to the primary testing unit, the one scheduled for the first human trials next month. The implications were staggering. He was tampering with equipment that would be connected to a human brain, Jack asked, horrified by the potential consequences. Lisa nodded grimly. We've taken the unit offline for complete verification, but preliminary analysis indicates the changes would have caused catastrophic failure during the trial, potentially fatal to the test subject. But why? Jack struggled to understand the motivation behind such a heinous act. What could Mitchell possibly gain from sabotaging his own company's breakthrough technology? Eleanor and Richard exchanged glances, a silent communication that spoke of long partnership. The neural interface isn't just another product line, Eleanor explained. It represents a fundamental shift in Black Star's direction away from consumer technology toward medical applications, a direction Mitchell has opposed from the beginning. He has significant investments in our competitors, Richard added, companies that would benefit enormously if Black Star's neural interface project failed spectacularly, especially in such a public and tragic manner. Jack sat back, processing the enormity of what they were describing. So he's willing to potentially kill someone to protect his investments and stop a change in corporate direction? That's monstrous. It's also difficult to prove definitively, Eleanor said, frustration evident in her voice. We have footage of Foster accessing the lab with Mitchell's credentials, but nothing directly linking Mitchell to the instructions. Foster is already claiming that he was conducting authorized after-hours testing, though he can't explain why he used Mitchell's access card instead of his own. So what's the plan? Jack asked, looking around at the serious faces surrounding him. Why bring me into this? Eleanor met his eyes directly, her gaze steady and determined. Because Mitchell has made it clear that he intends to use our personal connection to discredit both of us. At Monday's emergency board meeting, he plans to suggest that I've compromised company security by hiring you due to personal feelings rather than professional qualifications. The accusation stung, though Jack had suspected something along these lines since Mitchell's comments at the gala. "And what do Wayne do about that? We beat him to the punch," Richard said firmly. "Eleanor has called her own emergency board meeting for this afternoon. We present the evidence about Foster and the tampering, acknowledge the relationship between you two as transparent and above board, and force Mitchell to defend his actions rather than attack yours." Walter cleared his throat, drawing their attention. "There's one other thing you should know, Reynolds. When I was reviewing the security footage, I found something else. The day before your job interview, Mitchell was seen entering the HR department after hours. We believe he may have attempted to access your personnel file before it was even created." "Why would he do that?" Jack asked, confused by this new information. "Because he recognized your name," Eleanor said quietly, "from the hospital records 3 years ago. Rachel's name would have been in my confidential medical file as the nurse who treated me during my incident. Mitchell gained access to those records last year during a legal dispute over my fitness to continue as CEO. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. He's known about our connection all along," Jack realized. "He's been planning to use it against you from the moment you hired me." Eleanor nodded, her expression somber. "It appears so. He's been waiting for the perfect moment to spring the trap, ideally when the neural interface was about to enter human trials, when a scandal involving the CEO's judgment would have maximum impact." "So what do we do?" Jack asked again, feeling both angry at being used as a pawn in Mitchell's game and determined to protect Eleanor and Blackstar from his machinations. "We tell the truth," Eleanor said simply. "All of it. About Rachel, about how we met, about the developing personal relationship between us. We demonstrate that your hiring was based on legitimate qualifications and that your performance since joining Blackstar has been exemplary. And we present the evidence of Mitchell's apparent attempt to sabotage a potentially life-saving technology for his own financial gain. The strategy was bold, potentially risky, but Jack could see the logic in it. By voluntarily disclosing the very information Mitchell planned to use as a weapon, they would diffuse its power and shift focus to his own far more serious ethical breaches. "I'm in," Jack said firmly. "Whatever you need me to do." The emergency board meeting that afternoon was held in Blackstar's executive conference room. Its sleek modern design, a stark contrast to the 19th century power dynamics playing out around the massive table. Jack sat beside Richard, acutely aware of being the least corporate person in the room, as board members filed in with expressions ranging from curiosity to irritation at the weekend summons. Henry Mitchell arrived last, his confident stride faltering slightly when he spotted Jack already seated at the table. "Is this a staff meeting now, Eleanor?" he asked, his tone deceptively light. "I wasn't aware facilities personnel attended board-level discussions." "Mr. Reynolds is here at my request," Eleanor replied coolly from the head of the table. "As you'll understand shortly. Now that we're all present, I'd like to call this emergency session to order." What followed was the most methodical dismantling of a person's credibility Jack had ever witnessed. With clinical precision, Eleanor laid out the evidence of the security breach, Foster's tampering with the neural interface equipment, and the financial connections between Mitchell and Blackstar's competitors that created a clear conflict of interest. Mitchell's face grew progressively redder as the presentation continued, his initial dismissive attitude giving way to barely controlled anger. When Eleanor finally paused, he leapt to his feet. "This is preposterous. You're attempting to divert attention from your own ethical lapses by fabricating these absurd accusations. Foster was conducting authorized testing, as he's already explained to security." "At 2:17 in the morning using your access credentials?" Richard questioned mildly. "That seems an unusual arrangement, Henry." Mitchell's eyes narrowed as he shifted tactics. "Speaking of unusual arrangements," he said, his voice dripping with insinuation as he pointed at Jack. "Perhaps the board would be interested in knowing more about your relationship with Mr. Reynolds here. A man with no corporate experience suddenly hired for a senior position after allegedly saving your life. A man whose late wife coincidentally was the nurse who treated you during your undisclosed hospitalization 3 years ago. The optics are troubling, to say the least." A murmur ran through the board members, and Jack felt a moment of doubt. Presented in Mitchell's terms, the connection did sound suspicious, even manipulative. But Eleanor remained unruffled. "I was wondering when you'd bring that up, Henry. Yes, Jack Reynolds is the man who performed CPR when I suffered a heart attack 4 months ago. And yes, his late wife Rachel was a nurse at Mercy General who once showed me extraordinary kindness during a difficult time. Those facts are true. She rose from her chair, her posture straight and dignified. What's also true is that Jack is eminently qualified for his position, as his military record and performance evaluations clearly demonstrate. The board has copies of both in the materials before you. What's true is that since joining Blackstar, he has identified and addressed numerous security vulnerabilities, improved operational efficiency, and earned the respect of his entire department. Eleanor's gaze swept the room, meeting each board member's eyes in turn. And what's true is that I have developed personal feelings for Jack Reynolds, feelings that began after his hiring, not before, and that have been kept strictly separate from our professional relationship. I've disclosed this to our ethics committee as company policy requires. Jack felt a surge of emotion at her public acknowledgement of their relationship, something they themselves had barely discussed in private. The courage it took to make such an admission in this hostile environment, to face potential professional repercussions rather than deny their growing connection, spoke volumes about Eleanor's character. How convenient, Mitchell sneered, though Jack could see the calculation behind his eyes as he realized his primary weapon had been neutralized. A touching story, but hardly relevant to the serious security concerns I've raised about a security breach originating from your own research team, Richard interjected smoothly. About tampering with life-saving medical equipment using your security credentials. About your undisclosed financial interests in companies that would benefit directly from Blackstar's failure in the neural interface market. The board chair, a distinguished older woman who had remained silent throughout the presentation, finally spoke. I think we've heard enough to warrant a formal investigation, Mr. Mitchell. Until that investigation is complete, I move that you be placed on administrative leave and your access to all Blackstar facilities and systems be suspended. Mitchell's face contorted with fury. This is a setup, a conspiracy to force me out because I've questioned Eleanor's judgment and her increasingly erratic leadership since her heart attack. Sit down, Henry, the board chair said firmly. You're only making this worse for yourself. As the vote proceeded overwhelmingly in favor of Mitchell's suspension pending investigation, Jack watched Eleanor's face. Despite the professional victory, he could see the toll the confrontation had taken in the slight tension around her eyes, the careful way she controlled her breathing. For someone still recovering from a serious cardiac event, the stress of the situation must have been enormous. When the meeting finally concluded, Mitchell stormed out without another word, while the remaining board members gathered around Eleanor to express their support and concern. Jack hung back, uncertain of his place in this corporate denouement, until Eleanor's eyes found his across the room, her expression softening into something that transcended professional boundaries. Later, after the board had dispersed and the immediate crisis had been contained, Jack found Eleanor alone in her office, standing by the window, as the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Blackstar campus. Are you okay? He asked softly, closing the door behind him. She turned, her professional mask finally slipping to reveal the exhaustion beneath. I will be. It's been a challenging day. That's one word for it. Jack moved to stand beside her at the window, closed, but not touching, respecting the still public nature of their location. What do you said in there about your feelings? Eleanor met his eyes directly, vulnerability and strength coexisting in her gaze. I meant it, Jack. Every word. I know we haven't really discussed what's happening between us, but when Mitchell tried to use it as a weapon, I realized I won't have our story defined by his ugly insinuations. Whatever this is, whatever it's becoming, it deserves better than that. Jack found himself nodding, emotions he had been carefully containing for months, finally breaking through his practiced reserve. Rachel used to say that the most important things in life rarely arrive in the packages we expect. That sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as coincidences, accidents, even tragedies. He took a careful breath, organizing thoughts that had been circling in his mind since that first shared dinner with Lily. I don't know what this is either, Eleanor. I just know that when I'm with you, I feel like I'm moving towards something, not just surviving each day as it comes, and that's something I haven't felt since Rachel died. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears that she didn't try to hide, a remarkable vulnerability from a woman known for her composure and control. When you found me on that sidewalk, you didn't just restart my heart, Jack. You reminded me that I still had one. The simple truth of her statement hung between them, too profound for easy response. Instead, Jack reached out slowly, giving her time to withdraw if she wished, and took her hand in his. It was a small gesture, appropriate even in this professional setting, but it carried the weight of everything they'd shared since that chance encounter 4 months ago. Life and death, past and present loss, and the courage to begin again. Outside the window, Black Star employees were leaving for the day, heading home to families, friends, the lives that existed beyond corporate walls. Jack thought of Lily, probably full of stories about the Science Museum, and her new friend Anna waiting for him to pick her up from Richard's home. He thought of Rachel, whose compassion had created the first invisible thread connecting him to Eleanor years before they ever met. And he thought of Eleanor herself, not the CEO, but the woman who laughed at Lily's jokes, who found magic in ordinary rocks, who had survived her own dark night of the soul and emerged with wisdom to share. "Lily will be waiting," he said finally, still holding Eleanor's hand. "Would you like to join us for dinner? Nothing fancy, just something simple at our place. She's been asking when you'd visit the new apartment." Eleanor smiled, the tension of the day visibly easing from her shoulders. "I'd like that very much, Jack. More than I can say." As they left Black Star together, not as CEO and employee, but as two people choosing to share their evening, Jack felt something settle within him, a sense of rightness that transcended the extraordinary circumstances of their meeting. Rachel's words engraved on the watch Eleanor now wore daily echoed in his mind. It's never too late to begin again. Standing in the elevator, surrounded by the trappings of the corporate world that had once seemed so alien to him, Jack Reynolds found himself believing that promise more deeply than he had in years. Sometimes life offered second chances in the most unexpected ways. Sometimes healing came through the very act of helping others heal. And sometimes, if you were brave enough to reach for it, happiness could follow even the deepest loss, not as a replacement for what had been, but as a new chapter in a story still being written. The doors opened to the lobby, and together they stepped out into the fading afternoon light, leaving Black Star behind and moving towards something that felt remarkably like home. In the quiet moments between heartbeats, life reveals its most profound truth. Nothing is ever truly lost. Jack Reynolds stepped onto a downtown sidewalk as a man merely surviving and emerged as one beginning to truly live again. Eleanor Blackwell collapsed on cold pavement as a woman who had everything except what mattered most and rose with a second chance to reconnect with her humanity. The price of their journey was paid in vulnerability, the courage to acknowledge that strength sometimes means allowing others to see your weakness. For Jack, it meant opening the carefully guarded sanctuary of his grief to make room for new joy. For Eleanor, it required recognizing that success without connection is merely achievement, not fulfillment. They found in each other not replacements for what was lost, but companions for what remained the long road ahead, the child who needed both stability and wonder, the work that gave purpose beyond mere occupation. And somewhere perhaps Rachel watches over them all, her compassion echoing forward through time in ways she could never have imagined. What unexpected symmetry waits in your own life? What broken pieces might someday reveal themselves as the first step toward wholeness, if only you have eyes to see them?